after a couple of days off for some training. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and the show is on until 8:37 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app, or on YouTube, wherever you're watching this morning or joining us. Thank you for doing so. Sunny this morning, and we'll have sunshine through the day. Well, dark right now, but it will be sunny. A high of 12 degrees is what we're looking for in Winnipeg. So big thanks to Corey Funk and Faith Fundal, who were filling in here over the last couple of days. Corey is back once again. Of course, he's on air with us covering the commute, and our studio director, show director. Hi, Corey. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi. Hello, Abby. Abby's behind the controls this morning, as always. Abby's our technical producer on the show. And good morning to Kevin Nipatebo. Always nice to see you too, Kev. Kev is our YouTube producer. Waving hello to you this morning. All right, 3 minutes to 6. Let's get started. Heather Wells is here with headlines. Hello to you.
Hello. Good morning. Welcome back. Well, we're going to hear about a former broker for Winnipeg Shindico Realty who has testified in court. He's seen documents indicating the company president paid an $85,000 bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service, Phil Schiegel. The former broker is suing Shindico's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. We'll hear more about that. And the former CAO, accused of stealing $500,000 from a Western Manitoba municipality, has had her wages garnished. It happened in the RM of Gilbert Plains. We'll tell you about what happened there coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In Winnipeg, I mentioned a high of 12. I'll just look at Brandon here. High 13. Sunshine for you today as well. Thompson, mainly sunny, and your high just 4 degrees. But hey, you are not going to be below zero today. I know there was all those photos of Thompson and the snow this week. So love it or loathe it. We're at the end of November. I'm ahead of myself. We're at the end of October already. Okay, this morning on the program, first hour, we're going to talk more about a new report from the Canadian Institute for Health Information. It highlights some pressing healthcare challenges facing Canada. So we'll find out what's in the report. Also, we're going to talk about a week until Halloween and a film critic who's going to talk about kid-friendly Halloween movies that are spooky but not too scary. How do you walk the line if you're a parent? And a little bit later, we're going to play some of your beautiful stories from our listener line. You called us about why you love libraries. Stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Canadian journalist and Dateline correspondent Keith Morrison will be here to remember his stepson Matthew Perry 1 year after his death. Keith will talk about how his family is carrying on Matthew's mission to help people recovering from addiction with a new foundation.
And he so desperately wanted to get better.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will announce new reductions to immigration targets later today. CBC News has learned the projected number of permanent residents is expected to be cut by nearly 20%. For more on this, the CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from Ottawa. And Janice, what can you tell us?
Marcia, sources have confirmed to us, reporting yesterday in the National Post, that the revised immigration levels expected to be tabled in the House of Commons today are going to significantly cut the number of permanent residents that Canada approves for not only 2025, but the 2 years after that as well. This is a substantial course correction that follows a series of other recent moves to reduce the share of people that live in Canada temporarily as well. Earlier this year, the immigration minister changed eligibility rules, cut back on visa approvals for international students. Earlier this week, rules were tightened to make it harder and more expensive for employers to use temporary foreign workers instead of hiring locally. From welcoming Syrian refugees at the start of Justin Trudeau's government to scaling up to fix labour shortages in the wake of COVID, open immigration policy has been a Liberal legacy. But what was previously seen as a positive has bloated into a significant economic problem without the housing supply, the healthcare or other social services to properly integrate so many newcomers. So politically, the Prime Minister now finds himself playing defence like he was in question period yesterday.
As we see the situation shift, as the labour market shifts, we're making changes to the immigration system so that we can keep its support.
Mr. Speaker, there's nothing compassionate about it. Inviting people without a place for them to live or health care for them to have or jobs that provide them with paychecks.
So the timing of all of this is pretty significant.
Oh, it's an understatement to say this is a sensitive time, not only because recent polls suggest that what had been a political consensus in Canada that immigration is a benefit to this country has been fraying under the strain of socioeconomic pressures and, frankly, stressed out people needing something to blame. But for Trudeau personally, this is the morning after his extraordinary confrontation with MPs on his own bench who told him in plain language yesterday that their constituents want him to go. He did not take questions from reporters yesterday. We'll see if he has anything to say today about his future.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. French President Emmanuel Macron is pledging 100 million euros in humanitarian aid for Lebanon. He's hosting an international conference in Paris to address the war between Hezbollah and Israel. As Israel pushes ahead with its cross-border attacks against Hezbollah, it claims UN peacekeepers are in part to blame for the conflict. The military says the peacekeepers have long ignored Hezbollah activities near UN bases. Briar Stewart has more.
After Israeli artillery fires into southern Lebanon, a plume of dark black smoke rises beyond the ridgeline, which marks the border between the two countries.
We have found tremendous Hezbollah infrastructure, missiles, rockets.
And Lieutenant Colonel Jordan Hertzberg with the Israel Defense Forces tells CBC News that bunkers and some of the weapons were found very close to UN positions.
When we find Hezbollah bases 50 meters and 75 meters from a UN base, you have to be blind and deaf not to be aware of that.
UN peacekeepers have been stationed along the border since the late 1970s, but the mission was expanded after a ceasefire ended the Lebanon war in 2006. Candice Ardeel, a Canadian, is the deputy spokesperson for the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon.
We're here to monitor, to observe impartially.
She says in recent years, peacekeepers did report suspicious activity like tunnels being built near the border. But she says the UN wasn't able to do anything more because they needed permission to access the sites, and the Lebanese army wouldn't facilitate that.
So we weren't able to investigate some of these suspicious locations that we had seen.
The UN has repeatedly criticized Israel for attacking its positions, firing on one watchtower and bulldozing another earlier this week. Israel has pushed for the peacekeepers to move north out of the combat zone, but the UN forces vow they're staying put. Briar Stewart, CBC News, on the border between Lebanon and Israel.
Vladimir Putin is also calling for an end to the violence in the Middle East. The Russian president says the region is on the brink of full-scale war. Putin made his remarks during closing speeches at the Brics summit in Kazan, Russia. Putin has used this week's summit to show Western sanctions over Ukraine have not successfully isolated Russia internationally. With just a week and a half to go until the U.S. presidential election, both candidates are pushing to capture the undecided vote.
Vice President, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. You have a mic right here.
CNN's Anderson Cooper welcomes Kamala Harris to a town hall broadcast in Pennsylvania. The swing state is crucial for both Harris and her Republican rival, Donald Trump. The CBC's Karen Pauls is in Washington this morning. And Karen, how did that town hall go for Harris?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was asked questions by undecided voters ranging from fascism to food prices, immigration, Gaza, and anti-Semitism. She was most passionate when she focused on her Republican rival, saying former President Donald Trump is unstable and unfit to serve, even agreeing with the statement that he's a fascist. But it may be pocketbook issues Americans are more concerned with, like price gouging.
We saw it actually during the pandemic as well, where because of supply chain issues, there was a reduction of supply, and then they would inflate the price of everyday necessities. Not to mention, by the way, again, Donald Trump should be here tonight to talk with you and answer your questions. He's not. He refused to come.
Trump was invited to this originally as a second debate, but he declined.
Donald Trump had a rally of his own in Georgia, another swing state. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Trump's theme in Georgia was border security.
The difference is this border is 10 times, 15 times worse than it was in 2016, as you know. But we're going to stop it, and we're going to deport all of these criminals that have been brought into the country.
Trump did respond to Harris on social media, saying in part, "Comrade Kamala Harris sees that she is losing and losing badly. So now she is increasingly raising her rhetoric, going so far as to call me Adolf Hitler and anything else that comes to her warped mind." Trump heads to rallies in Arizona and Nevada today. Harris and former President Barack Obama will be in Georgia, where Bruce Springsteen will perform as part of their Get Out the Vote events.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. More than 80% of Canadian adults say they now have access to a regular healthcare provider, but there are still over 5 million people who say they don't. Those figures come from the Canadian Institute for Health Information, or CIHI. The independent agency compiled data on key health system metrics from all provinces and territories except for Quebec. Kathleen Morris is the VP of Research and Analytics at CIHI.
One of the big objectives of this project is for provinces to learn from each other about what's working and where they could improve.
The report found the 3 territories and some of the Atlantic provinces are the jurisdictions struggling the most with primary care. Guelph, Ontario is coming face to face with an unusual wave of crime. Butter theft. Store shelves are being raided. Hundreds of dollars worth of the kitchen staple are disappearing. As Jamie Strachan reports, people are hoping the butter crimes don't spread.
I can't imagine why they're stealing butter.
A Guelph grocery store, the scene of a butter heist that sounds like a bank robbery. Scott Tracy is with the Guelph police.
There was a white sedan that was seen at the back of the business. They loaded the butter in and away they went.
About $1,000 worth of butter was taken by 2 men.
It's certainly unusual, but there is we believe an organized crime aspect to it.
Turns out in Guelph there's been a butter crime wave, 7 such thefts in the last year. Most end up on the black market, police say, or on resale websites. Butter prices have skyrocketed, making it attractive, says Dalhousie University's Sylvain Charlebois.
So it's particularly easy to find a buyer, to find someone who actually is interested in buying butter like that.
Jordan Foster gets it. Butter is the backbone of her cookie store. She has no interest in the black market, but understands why some would.
I could see it would be an interest to stock up, especially if you are someone that leverages or uses butter in a lot of your recipes.
The investigation continues, Tracy says.
There's no serial number on butter, I don't think. There's no VIN, that kind of thing. So it's a little harder to track it down.
Harder to predict whether these thefts will continue or simply melt away. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Guelph, Ontario.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live downtown with our team at the show, and the morning show's on until 8:37 a.m., but let's get started with this 6 o'clock hour. We're going to be 12 degrees in the city today. Time right now is 6:10 a.m. and you might be on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. I should mention all the places that you might be joining us. It is, by the way, a school day number 5 on this Thursday, October 24th. Hard to believe. Well, this hour on the program, we're going to hear about a new report from the Canadian Institute for Health Information highlighting the greatest challenges for healthcare in this country, so stay tuned for that. Plus, we're going to have the results from the first national radon exposure study in more than a decade. They've been released. We'll find out what researchers have learned. And you trying to watch something spooky with the kids for Halloween? Have you ever got halfway through a movie and then you're like, wait a minute, this one's too scary for the kids? We've got a handy interview up this hour that'll help you choose a movie that will be appropriate for the whole family. And more analysis of what's going on with this letter and Justin Trudeau and the MPs that have come forward. So we'll have an interview about that as well. All right, locally, Heather Wells is in with our headlines. Hello to you.
Hello, good morning. A Winnipeg mother had to wait weeks to find out if her son will get any help as he recovers from a brutal machete attack. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after that August attack. She's had to take time off work for appointments for him and pay for special equipment. We're going to hear what happened and how she finally did get a response from the Victim Services Department. A former broker for Winnipeg's Shindico Realty has testified in court he has seen documents indicating the company's president paid an $85,000 bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service, Phil Schiegel. The former broker is suing Shindeco's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. That story as well in our next local news at 6:30.
Heather Wells, Abby Adeyemi, Corey Funk. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you. You know what? Maybe I should be suing Corey for identity theft.
That was the funniest thing.
Yeah.
The amount of people around the newsroom afterwards calling me Marcy Marcusa yesterday.
I love that you accidentally called yourself Marcy Marcusa.
You know, hopefully you could identify. You know, you're always like a few words ahead, and all of a sudden I just forgot to say that I'm Corey Funk. I just said I'm Marcy Marcusa.
Of course I can identify. When Heather's off, there's a different newsreader in the morning. Heather, I call them your name.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. Here's Heather Wells. And then I'm so embarrassed because you're just sort of on autopilot a little bit. One time I think I said something when I used to co-host a show with Terry McLeod for years, of course. And one time I think I said I'm here with Terry, and Terry wasn't even in that day. Like, I mean, your brain does all these strange things.
I think it's just that Corey was in the role. He was just in the zone, taking his role so seriously.
I do try to get into character when I'm fill-in hosting, and so I just I was Marcy Marcusa yesterday.
Excellent. Well, we'll get you a wig. You can borrow some of my clothing next time and get you ready.
Thanks, Marcy. You're Marcy now.
All right, let's get into the forecast here and turn our attention to what the day's going to be like, Abby.
Yeah, 4 degrees right now in Winnipeg. It's clear in the downtown, but I'd say it's cooler at the airport. We're at -2 with some frosty conditions being felt there. We will start the day with some sunshine this morning, so look out for that golden hour that will be happening very soon, followed by a mix of sun and clouds. The high for today, we do warm up to 12 degrees, which is warmer than our usual high for this time of the season, which is 7. We're supposed to be at 7 this time of the year. Up north, some regions will be seeing rain making a transition to light snow later today, so look out for that for folks in Thompson and Churchill. Currently mainly clear in Thompson. You see some flurries later at -4 and -2 in Churchill, seeing a light snow already beginning this morning. In other regions down south, we're seeing Brandon at -4, Dauphin and Gimli hovering near 1 degree right now, Zero and Maurice, and -2 in Steinbach. Most of those regions will get to highs of 13 today, so it's looking pretty good. We're going to see sunny skies, a mix of sun and clouds, and then some light winds, and that highs of near 13.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is obviously here as well. So the commute this morning, what are we looking at?
Yeah, really quiet commute overall so far. I haven't heard any major issues at all. I know the past few days there has been an issue eastbound Portage right at Main there. There's that pre-construction that started, and it's been trouble turning left onto Main Street from eastbound Portage. But that's always a shifting thing, as we've heard from the city, so it might be different today. But just a heads up, and I'd love to hear if it is different. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line if you're walking, biking, driving. Would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, we want to revisit some details of an important story in our province because yesterday the province provided an update on the plans to search the Prairie Green landfill. Last month, the Manitoba government partnered with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs to hire people to search the landfill. The remains of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, and both who are members of Long Plain First Nation are believed to be there. They were killed by serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky in the spring of 2022. Now, Cambria Harris is the daughter of Morgan Harris, and she spoke about how meaningful this search is for her family.
My family is very, very grateful to be here, standing and still advocating on our mom's behalf as the search moves on in the next few weeks. We're overwhelmed with the sheer compassion within individuals that we're meeting along the way, the compassion that people share as we sit through these interviews, interviewing people for the search, and it's a lot. In the next few months ahead, it'll be very emotionally tolling, it'll be physically tolling, but most importantly, it's not just work, it's something that you bring home. And these searchers are tasked with a very real task, and that's hopefully providing closure to our grief of our loved ones. It's been 2 years now that my mom's been laying in a landfill, as well as Mercedes Myron, and that's 2 years too long, and I'm excited to finally be getting this on the way. And if it weren't for the support of the community and just everyone along the way who helped not only advocate but push forward, this kind of work is just amazing and immense. And I think about the grief that my family had to go through the last 2 years, and it's something that no one should ever have to go through, no human being should ever have to go through. And I think that's what we need to remember at the end of the day, is that we're only human, and so are women in those landfills. And when you get equality for our women, that's equality for all. When you're helping our women, you're helping everybody as well, because that's the kind of work that pushes forward to make those changes within those systems. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a lot of work that needs to get done. But for our families, we're finally seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm grateful for that, and I hope that it helps shine a light on MMIWG2S, but also helps bring that voice back, and hopefully help bring that voice back to those voiceless people who aren't able to stand and speak on their behalf today. So I would just like to say, yeah, we're searching the landfill, and we're ready to get it done. Every time from the very beginning, even before the search was even in planning, we have come to Peregrine Landfill to do ceremony to honor these women in the way that they should have been. So today in our hands we have tobacco ties that represent every one of the women lost to this tragedy, as well as any of our missing loved ones out there that we may not know about. And so it's really just to offer a prayer to our loved ones in the spirit world, and to help guide them, and help guide us as well as we move on in this journey in the next couple of months. So as we move through the phases, typically we'll go and we'll hang up these ties at the actual landfill site, at the cell of interest, but because there's active operations happening right now, we won't be doing that today, and probably just hanging them at our healing lodge. Families for far too long our calls have gone unheard, and families have essentially grieved and cried in front of the world and the media over and over again. And so it's an honor to be able to sit on the the oversight committee in terms of the landfill search, because it's important to keep this family led, because that's my mom in the landfill, and I can't just let anyone go searching for her. I need someone with compassion, I need someone with empathy, I need someone who can be a team lead and can help your other teammates during this search. And so it's important to ensure that we have the right people in those positions, so that we can continue to give back in other ways, whether that be job opportunities for our Indigenous community and for those who have been there every step of the way when no system, no police would. Because it's really been, our communities are the backbone of our society, and so are our women. And I think it's important to establish that and take back that precedent that was set way back in July 2023, when we did get the initial no. And so by standing here today and saying that we're searching the landfill is taking that precedent back and putting our family first.
She's just really one of the most well-spoken young women in the province, and given what her family's been through. That is Cambria Harris, a daughter of Morgan Harris, speaking at a provincial landfill search update that happened yesterday in our community. They do say that stage 4 of the search will start in early December. And if you want to read more of these details, as CBC covered it, of course, cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
6:21 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Great to be back with you after a couple of days off for some specialized training. It is clear in Winnipeg right now. It's 4 degrees. The high today is going to be 12 degrees. Lots of sunshine in the forecast. Brandon sitting clear in -4 right now, so you're below zero. Thompson also below zero at -3. Well, next on the show, millions of people in this country struggle to access primary health care. At the same time, more people are needed to deliver that care. Those are just a couple of the highlights from a new report from the Canadian Institute for Health Information, or CIHI. Cheryl Chewy's here to talk about it. She's Director of Health System Analytics at the Canadian Institute for Health Information. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So I mentioned just a couple of aspects of this report. Can you take us a little bit deeper? How many people, let's walk through this, how many people can't get primary care in Canada?
And so this new report looks at the state of healthcare in Canada across 4 areas that matter to Canadians. One of them, as you mentioned, is accessing primary health care. Another is health workforce and surgeries. A third is mental health and substance use services. And the fourth is modernizing our systems and tools for sharing electronic health information. So one of the indicators that we looked at was Canadians' access to a primary care provider, like a family doctor or nurse practitioner. And so 83% of Canadians aged 18 and older reported that they do have access. But that means that 17%, or about 5.4 million Canadian adults, said that they struggle to access primary care.
And if you walk through the other 3 points of highlight, obviously accessing the healthcare system in a more technologically advanced way has been a long-standing issue. What does this report tell us about that?
Yeah, so this report tells us that Canadians are really interested in accessing their health information online, with 4 in 5 Canadians saying that they want this information, but fewer than 40% have actually been able to access their health information online. We also looked at health professionals and how they share patient information with each other outside of their practice settings. And so 29% of physicians reported that they are able to share outside of their own practice settings. So we can see that there are some areas for improvement here when it comes to the tools and the systems.
Did the report at all, just to stay with that point for a moment, did the report at all look at what is getting in the way of making those numbers better? Like, is it the infrastructure, like the actual computers, the equipment that is missing, or is it the connectivity of systems that is missing?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of those things, and we know this is an important priority. It's been recognized by provinces and territories that they're working on. But one thing that is important for fast, accurate, and secure sharing of information is having the same data standards, so that when providers share information with each other, it means the same thing, and then it can be useful for patient care and effective for patient care. There are also investments being made in having the right systems and tools. So I think it's a combination of everything.
I was just writing out the points here so we could walk through all of them. What about mental health and substance use services? Can you elaborate a little bit on what the report found on what's lacking there?
So for mental health and substance use, we looked at wait times for community mental health counseling. So this would be for scheduled visits to a mental health professional. And so it doesn't include things like crisis services, which may be addressed through hospitals or emergency departments. But what we saw there is that about half of Canadians wait 25 days for their first scheduled mental health counseling appointment, but 1 in 10 Canadians can wait up to 5 months or longer for their first appointment.
I know we've echoed a lot of those stats here in Manitoba through individual stories we've covered. The other thing that we have recently covered, actually just this month, is talking to people who are leaving for surgeries. So that was your other point, the health workforce and surgeries. What are we seeing across the country in this report?
Yeah, so we know that the COVID-19 pandemic had a big impact on scheduled and non-emergency surgeries, such as things like knee replacements, hip replacements, and cataract procedures. A lot of those were delayed or canceled during the pandemic to prioritize urgent and life-saving procedures and to make room for COVID-19 patients. And so systems have been recovering from those impacts. And we saw that in 2023, across Canada, more than 2.3 million surgeries were performed, which was actually an increase of 5% over the number that were performed before the pandemic in 2019. So this is trending in the right direction, though provinces and territories are still working on reducing wait times for some of these procedures.
One of the points in this overall is that younger adults are struggling more with access to care. Can you talk a little bit more about why that is?
Well, what we see is that compared to other age groups, adults 18 to 34 are the least likely to have a regular healthcare provider. So only about 3/4 of younger adults have a regular provider. And there could be many reasons for this. It's possible that younger adults may not be as actively seeking care. They may be relatively healthier, or they may get their care in other types of locations like walk-in clinics, or be moving around for school or for work. So there could be many reasons for that, but it is still really important to have a regular healthcare provider to build that relationship and get sort of personalized care, as well as have the preventative disease screening and management of any diseases to help slow or prevent their progression.
And to talk about supporting and strengthening the health workforce in Canada, I mean, we've been discussing this in Manitoba in earnest in the last year. We had a new government elected here that really only ran on healthcare. That was their big thing, and has been trying different things to do this. What more needs to be done across the country to better support and strengthen that workforce in this country?
Yeah, we're seeing that since the pandemic, people who work in healthcare have struggled with increased workloads and longer work hours. And at the same time, we know that Canada's population is aging and growing, which is leading to an increased need for care. So governments and health planners across the country are working to address these challenges, and there are a number of things that they're doing already, which include improving working conditions to keep retaining existing healthcare professionals in the workforce and to attract new people to the health workforce, and increasing the number of spots in training programs and speeding up credentialing for internationally trained health workers to keep strengthening Canada's health workforce.
Big report, Cheryl, to chew through. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you so much.
That's the Director of Health System Analytics at the Canadian Institute for Health Information, or CHI. Hi, Cheryl Chewy with us on Information Radio. If you want to read more about the report, you can check out their website.
This is a proposed corridor for multiple pipeline projects.
You're crossing our territory on two ends of your pipeline. Who gave you permission?
Pipelines break of the pipelines would destroy the water and everything in it.
They got to come through us first.
This is an immediate evacuation order for all Coastal GasLink employees. I feel like we are at work. It's just all been building up to this point.
Yenta on The Passionate Eye. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Coming up a little later in the show, you filled our listener lines about your love of libraries. So in the next hour of the show, we're going to hear more about that. Also, after 7 o'clock, to something serious here, 2 Asian Canadians wrote editorials about being Asian in Manitoba. And they actually say they expected some pushback, but they did not expect what they got, including anger. So stay tuned. We're going to hear more about this as we hear from them. That's coming up after 7 o'clock on the program. Business news, though, is more immediately coming up right after the 6:30 news here. We're going to touch base with what's happening in the world of business. And Christly Ramlakan is in with our report. You probably noticed yesterday that the Bank of Canada has cut the key lending rate by a more aggressive 0.5 percentage point. So we're going to find out more about what that means for you coming up in the business report. So stay tuned for that. If you want to reach the show at any point, you can call us on the listener line, 788-3205, with any feedback or ideas, or if you want to add your voice to a question that we're asking on the air, we'd love to hear from you. The number for traffic updates is different. So far, so good, so early, but 788-3093 if you do need to report anything on your Thursday morning walk, drive, or roll. Let's get into the CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is clear. It feels like autumn out there. It's cool start. 4 degrees right now downtown. But that sunshine is going to warm us up to an above normal high of 12. The normal high is 7. A former broker for Shindico Realty testified in court yesterday. He has seen documents indicating the company president paid a bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service. CBC's Bartley Kivas has details.
John Pearson is suing Shindico's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. Pearson said in the statement of claim he ended a brokerage association with Shindico in 2022, partly because of what he called negative media attention on Shindico President Sandy Schindelman and Vice President Robert Schindelman. Pearson also claimed in the statement the Schindelmans were alleged to be involved in political corruption. In a statement of defense, the Schindelmans denied that claim. During cross-examination Wednesday, Pearson testified he was provided documents from the Schindelmans' legal counsel that indicate that Sandy Schindelman paid an $85,000 bribe to former Winnipeg CAO Phil Schiegel. Pearson testified this was related to a fire paramedic station in Sage Creek. Outside court, the lawyer for the Schindelmans declined to comment on Pearson's testimony. CBC News also asked Schiegel for comment but did not hear back. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg mother whose son was brutally attacked with a machete says she was kept in the dark for weeks by the province's Victim Services Department. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after that August attack. She had to take time off work for his appointments and to pay for special equipment to aid in his recovery. But she says her inquiries to the provincial program offering compensation for victims of crime seem to have fallen on deaf ears.
There's just no response. It's not even a yes or no, or here's the things we can help with. You can go forward and get more receipts or something. It's just complete silence.
CBC contacted Victim Services after speaking with Smart this week. It was only then, she says, she finally received a reply. She says they apologized for the delay and told her they will cover most of her expenses. A former CAO accused of stealing $500,000 from a Western Manitoba municipality has had her wages garnished. Amber Fisher was ordered to hand over her wages to pay off nearly $550,000 taken from the municipality of Gilbert Plains. The order came after Fisher failed to file a statement of defense in response to a lawsuit by the municipality. The RM of Gilbert Plains accused her of stealing through a phony cyber attack. Reeve Jim Mancher says they are waiting for RCMP to finish a criminal investigation into the missing money.
We have a few new councillors since this started originally, and I think most people are anxious to see the results of the investigation become public, and hopefully soon that'll happen.
Manitoba RCMP spokesperson Tara Seal says no charges have been filed against Fisher. The federal government is expected to announce plans today to cut the number of immigrants coming to Canada down to 395,000 permanent residents next year from 485,000 this year. The move comes as Canada faces a housing crisis. On the platform X, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says, quote, "We are going to have fewer temporary foreign workers in Canada." He also says there will be stricter rules for companies to prove why they can't hire Canadian workers first. Russian President Vladimir Putin is calling for an end to fighting in the Middle East.
Очередной виток палестино-израильского противостояния стал, пожалуй,
That's Putin saying a ceasefire is needed to prevent the region from being engulfed in a full-scale war. Putin making his remarks at the Brics summit, which came to a close today in Russia. The summit brought together Russian allies like India, China, Brazil, and a number of Arab nations. Putin says the gathering is proof Western sanctions over the war in Ukraine are not isolating Russia internationally. And we are following a developing story in Seattle. Boeing factory workers have voted to reject a new contract. That means they will continue their 6-week-old strike. Union leaders say a majority of members voted against Boeing's latest offer, and that latest offer included pay raises of 35% over 4 years. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7, and you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Time for your regional forecast from CBC, and that means that Abby Adiemi's back in the airwaves. What do we know?
I will tell you that it's going to be more like a sunny condition today. We will feel that, temperatures warming up to 12 and 13 for most of the regions later. But let's start with Winnipeg right now at 4 degrees. Clear skies we're seeing outside. As mentioned, sunny skies and the forecast this morning. We see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds by the noon period. It will be a breezy day. Then we warm up to a high of 12 for tonight. Some partly cloudy conditions and we're deep to 2. Heading west to Brandon, -4 at this time. Clear skies also being spotted in that part of the province. Today, we will see sunny conditions for folks in Brandon, becoming a mix of sun and clouds with breezy conditions developing this afternoon. The high will get to 13. Thompson, -4 at this time. Mainly clear skies you're seeing. Expect some sunny conditions turning to some cloudy. You'll feel it turning to like afternoon rain when you get past your lunch break. The high will get to 4 degrees. Churchill at -2 and cloudy. Today will be mainly cloudy with a chance of flurries. Light snow felt earlier, but you're still going to see more of that later as it clears. You drop to you get to a high of 0 for folks in Churchill. Dauphin is at -1 and clear at this time. Today's forecast calls for increasing cloudiness, a chance of showers in the forecast with a high of 10 today. Gimli is sitting at 1 and clear at this time. Forecast for the Interlake region calls for sunny condition, turning to a mix of sun and clouds with a light breeze and a high of 12. Steinbach is at -2 and clear, mainly sunny skies in the forecast with light breeze, also warming up to a high of 13. And Murray sitting at 0 at this time. Clear conditions you're seeing. The forecast for that region calls for mainly sunny skies, light breeze, warming up to a high of 13. And then for tonight, you dip down to 0. So if we look at down south, we're going to see sunny skies and breezy conditions in most of the areas, and temperatures just ranging from chilly -4 in the north to pleasant 13 in south. Right now, 4 degrees in Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, don't listen to the lady on the radio. I got the school day wrong. It is school day number 6. A listener just wrote to me. So sorry if you have math today instead of gym. At least that used to be the trade-off. I would rather have gym than math. But let's get into the commute. Corey.
Quiet commute overall so far. I actually haven't heard of any major issues out there. But if you see something, if you're out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. That number 204-788-3093.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Ooh, you know what? I was a big social studies guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that
actually
makes sense
world
for you.
issues.
Yeah.
That was my jam.
Yeah. I actually just liked school. I liked everything. I liked math, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I did not like math as much, but
But I never took physics. Yeah, there's this
Okay.
big press to take physics back in the day. I actually never took physics.
Okay.
So I took biology instead. Loved that.
Well, that's fun.
Loved that. All right, we're on a tangent. That's not unusual for us, by the way. Let's refocus on the business news this morning. Hi, Crystal Ramlakan.
Hey, good morning, Marcy. I also dropped physics, so don't worry.
Well, good thing we didn't drop math because we understand the first story this morning in your report. The Bank of Canada cutting the key lending rate by a more aggressive 0.5 percentage point. What will it mean for people?
Yes, so this means that people looking to buy a home or who, have debt can borrow at a better rate. So experts say the cut could spur buying activity in the real estate market. The housing market has been sluggish in many regions due to elevated borrowing costs, but rising demand could cause home prices to increase more rapidly. So it's going to be a balancing act for people when they want to enter the market. So the policy rate is now at 3.75%, and policymakers cut the rate in response to cooling inflation and the soft labor market. They want to see the economy pick back up again. And the rate reduction is good news, though, for homeowners facing upcoming mortgage renewals. And those with variable mortgages and home equity lines of credit should see their interest payments fall. And all of the big 6 banks have lowered their prime rate to 5.95%, down from 6.45%. Stefan Marion is the chief economist with National Bank for more on this.
The reality is people are prudent, they're preparing for payment shock, they're saving a lot, they're not spending as much. Please, let's give them a little bit more breathing room by cutting rates more aggressively. I don't think that's going to generate more inflation.
So the Bank of Canada's next scheduled interest rate decision is December 11th, and forecasters are predicting another 0.5 point rate cut.
Everyone locked in is going to start to cry soon. All right, let's go to another story. And I think this is going to speak, unfortunately, to a lot of Manitoba businesses. There's a report out in Canada about how small businesses feel about crime and safety. What does it say?
Yeah, so nearly 2/3 of Canadian small businesses reported an increase in crime within their communities over the past year. And that's in a new survey from the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Now, nearly half report being directly impacted by crime and community safety issues, which is an increase from about a quarter that reported that last year. So primary concerns include things like vandalism, breaking and entering, and theft. And most owners say they are dissatisfied with the way governments have been handling crime and safety issues. 78% believe governments are not effectively collaborating to address these kinds of issues. So more than half say they consistently file police reports when they experience safety issues, but only 1/3 are satisfied with police response times and services. Sarin Yu is with the CFIB and co-wrote this report.
We do believe that a lot of people are struggling, so that's leading to theft because of the affordability issues that people are facing. We've seen, I think, an increase in the housing crisis. So a lot of homelessness, I think, could be contributing to it all. I think as well, mental health issues and addictions, they're all kind of contributing to the problem as well.
So only 15% of businesses report always filing insurance claims as well because they're concerned about their premiums increasing. They also say filing is time-consuming and claims requirements are often complex. So the CFIB says it would like all levels of government and police to recognize what they call the serious nature of the problem across the country.
And to a snack now that a lot of people know, those little tiny orange goldfish crackers, but apparently the company's changing the name?
Yes. So the company is betting that a sophisticated name change could expand its audience. So the brand is tweaking its name for just a limited time to Chilean sea bass.
Really?
So this
From goldfish to
Yes.
Chilean sea bass.
Yes. So this is part of a strategy to attract adults and reestablish its relevance amid a broader decline in snacking following a pandemic peak. So have a listen to what their approach is here.
They look just like goldfish. They taste just like goldfish, except they're called Chilean sea bass. So sophisticated. So adult.
All right.
So despite rebranding as a popular seafood item, the recipe and appearance of the snack are not changing. And the Chilean sea bass snacks are not going to be on shelves. Actually, the bags featuring the new branding are just going to be sold online and just for 1 week. So, that's kind of a marketing gimmick.
Yeah.
And the temporary new name, though, is a nod to the brand's roots. Pepperidge Farm launched Goldfish back in 1962, and they were initially aimed at adults as a bar snack. But of course, we know since the 1990s, Goldfish have been sold mostly as a snack for kids with playful packaging.
Man, now we have to come up with a name for Teddy Grahams if they want to follow suit and do the same thing, right?
Oh, yes.
What's up in markets today? What's going on?
In Europe, stocks are slightly higher as investors review another batch of earnings reports. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mostly falling after Wall Street extended declines. So right now, Japan is up, Shanghai and Hong Kong are both down. Oil is up $1.43 to $72.20 US per barrel. Gold is up $21.80 to $2,736.60 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.12 of a cent to 72.4 cents US.
Corey Funk, our show director, full credit, just said in my ear, Chilean sea bears. Drop the mic. All right. Thank you, Crystal Lee. Talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Marcy.
That is Business News with Crystal Lee Ramlakan. Time right now is 6:44 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Dark right now, of course, because it's still early, but when the sun comes up, it should stay up. Sunny day expected in Winnipeg, a high of 12. Thanks so much for joining us here on the morning show. Well, next on the program, there's a new study that has found that radon exposure is on the rise in Canada. Radon is a naturally occurring gas that can cause lung cancer. Now, this study looked at radon levels all across the country in both urban and rural areas. And Aaron Gutsaris is the scientific lead on the survey. He explains what was uncovered.
In 2012, when the Cross Canada survey of the time came out, the conclusion was roughly 7% of Canadian residential buildings exceeded Health Canada's action guideline of 200 becquerels per cubic meter. And that's an important number because that's a level where Canadians, if exposed to, will be at a serious risk of increased lifetime risk of lung cancer. The new report finds that it's not 7% anymore. It's 17.8%, a dramatic 2.5 times increase in the risk of a household exceeding that level. The most logical explanation is new houses have higher radon. This is something building scientists have been observing as a trend across the country over the past dozen years. We've also been retrofitting our houses. We have been making them more airtight but not necessarily have we been doing so in a way that considers how fresh air comes in and stale air leaves. If that's imbalanced, the house can make up the difference by sucking on the ground. And third, in this past 12 years, more Canadians have been testing in the lower levels of the property. About 2/3 of the most recent study tested in the basement. Now, the advice is always to test in the lowest level of the building where someone spends more than 4 hours a day. In 2012, only 1/3 tested in that basement. And so because basements have 20% higher radon, collectively, that's why we think levels have gone up quite so much. The alarming fact is that no area of Canada is radon-free, and in fact, it's pretty consistent across the whole country, with the exception of the Vancouver Island, more or less. You're looking at risk level differences of only 1 in 6 to 1 in 3. There's certain cities that come out a little higher, where more than a quarter to a half of all buildings are over 200 becquerels. These include cities such as Halifax, Sherbrooke, Quebec, and others. Regina, for example, is one of the higher ones. Rural buildings do, across the board, no matter what community you look at, in what part of Canada you look at, contain higher radon. There's an effect in rural communities relating to the presence of groundwater wells. That tends to increase the amount of radon in the soils under residential properties. And across the board in Canada, we do see more rural communities, meaning communities with a lower population density. The good news is that a radon test is widely accessible. It takes about 3 months. So you take a little radon test device, you just pop it out of the airtight bag, place it in the lowest level of your house where someone's spending at least 4 hours a day. And then you just pop it back in the post to the lab and you get your results. And the typical Canadian radon mitigation, it's 1 to 2 days work. It sinks a very small hole through the foundation to that layer of sort of gravel upon which your foundation rests. And instead of the soil gas coming in your house, it's preferentially drawn up through a pipe, which is vented out through the side of your house. And your house never sees it. This is very, very effective technology.
So that's Aaron Goodarzi, the scientific lead on the Cross-Canada Survey of Radon Exposure in the residential buildings of urban and rural communities. And as you heard, a number of cities across this country don't fare well in this report. He's also associate professor, by the way, of the Cummings School of Medicine at University of Calgary. And you can read more about the story online at cbc.ca. Songwriter and YouTuber Gabriella Bean, wish you the best on CBC. 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, it is that time of year. Have you ever sat down to watch a spooky film with the family and halfway through you're like, whoops, better turn this off. This is not kid friendly. This has crossed from spooky into way too scary. Well, this morning we got some ideas. There's a lot of Halloween horror flicks that are way too scary for kids and for even some grown-ups, but there's lots of family-friendly options. Di Golding is with us to talk about this. She's a film and television critic and a member of the Critics' Choice Association and a frequent contributor to CBC Radio. Hi, Di.
Hello.
How you doing?
I only do Count Von Count. That's my only spooky voice.
I know. All I got is a lame vampire. So, why are kids drawn to spooky but obviously not overly scary movies? Like, what's the line and what's the appeal?
Well, I think it's the same reason that adults are, right? It's that flood of endorphins we get when the fight or flight instinct is engaged. And kids, like adults, get that big neurochemical punch, right? After you've survived something that your body knows was really not going to hurt you. And I think that's why so many people enjoy roller coasters, right? It's kind of like risks, but risk-free. And I think scary, experts say that kids can benefit from scary experiences under the right conditions, and scary experiences offer a low-cost way for children and adolescents to confront specific fears and also the concept of fear itself.
So where can parents find, I want to get right into it, Halloween movies and programs for younger kids, and do you have recommendations for us?
I have lots of recommendations, and I'm going to start with the free ones because that's my favorite F word. Okay, Tubi, Tubi is probably my favorite site for adults and for kids. It's ad-supported, but they've got a kids section, a friendly monster section with things like Casper the Friendly Ghost and little treehouse films. Then you've got CBC Gem Kids, also free, homepage, full, Halloween section. And then I've got two. There's one called Hoopla and one called Canopy with a K. And both of these streaming services are free and available through your public library. You sign up and you get X number of credits a month. Both have very impressive catalogs, and they have a Halloween section, read-along books. I didn't even know they still did that. They've got a kids section on myths and famous fables and courage and confidence section. So if you're looking for free or free with ads, that's where I would go. And then, of course, for a paid platform, Netflix has Goosebumps and Hotel Transylvania, an animated series like The Hollow, which it's about three teens who find themselves in a strange realm, and they have to work together and solve puzzles to outwit scary beasts. So surprisingly large amount of spooky and scary content for younger kids.
And then if you give an older kid or a tween, what would you recommend? And then what's the difference? Like, how do you judge how much more they can handle?
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, I'm not one to ask. I think a lot of older folk like myself were not introduced to these things the right way. I mean, I was brought to, I was brought by my teenage brothers to the drive-in to see Carrie when I was 5.
And I was
not recommend.
And I was in a back room during an adult party, and all the kids decided to put on the TV, and we found like Firestarter, some kind of movie where it was just awful. And this other movie called Audrey. Yeah, nobody was minding the kids. But but there are things that are if you are a teenager, right, or a tween, as I said, that are you would recommend.
Absolutely. I think older kids are ready to be introduced to the incredible animated world of Hayao Miyazaki. I mean, it presents films they've got films like Howl's Moving Castle, the incredible film Spirited Away. It introduces you to themes like witches and the afterlife, but in serious themes, but in an enchanting, beautiful, understandable way. And those are found in the kids section on Netflix. Now, I found a crowd-pleasing series. Definitely more comedic than scary, but still has some spooks and jump scares. It's got wide appeal for older kids all the way up to adults. It's called Ghosts. There's a British version available on CBC Gem.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a U.S. version, which is actually filmed in Montreal, but it's available on Amazon Prime. Yeah, it's Ghosts. It's a young couple. They inherit a mansion populated by the undead who've lived there over the centuries. Now this young couple want to turn it into a B&B, but the ghosts are not pleased with this, and the ghosts represent different eras. There's a Viking, a Continental Army soldier who died of dysentery, a finance bro who died without his pants on, the whole spectrum. Through circumstances, one of the living begins to communicate with the ghosts, and now they have to all work together to open this B&B. It's kind of like a supernatural workplace comedy, like a spooky version of Superstore or The Office.
What are some spooky classics for family watching in addition to Ghosts?
Well, this is where I'd go to Disney Plus, which really you got to admit they have the best catalog for kids movies, old and new. But with newer stuff, they got Maleficent and Into the Woods, and they've also got some great anthologies of sitcoms and other series with all the Halloween episodes together. That's where you're going to find your Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, and they also have a teen scream section and a family-friendly scares category, and so that's where you're going to find classics like Hocus Pocus 1 and 2, and several versions of the Haunted Mansion, including, the Muppets version, my favorite, Tim Burton's Frankenweenie, Nightmare Before Christmas by Henry Selick, and then if you really want to get scary, we got to talk about the old Disney classic cartoons that I think many of us were scarred for life by those. I think that's why we're having this conversation. Some of those are a little bit too dark.
Yeah, like Watcher in the Woods. Why? Okay. Not even a cartoon, but it was a Disney
Still
after
not over
school.
it,
Yeah, still not over it. All right, thanks, Di. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. That's Di Golding, film and TV critic, member of the Critics' Choice Association, and a frequent contributor to CBC Radio with a huge list. Remember, these interviews live on our CBC Listen app, and you can check them out, because I know she rolled through a lot of advice there, a lot of titles. 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, and Heather Wells joins us now with news, headlines, and developments and other stories that we're following in Manitoba. Hi there.
Hi. Yes, well, a Winnipeg mom had to wait weeks to find out if her son will get any help as he recovers from a brutal machete attack. It happened in August. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after that attack. She had to take time off work for appointments for him and pay for special equipment to aid his recovery. But she went weeks without hearing a word from the province's Victim Services Department. We'll hear more on that. And a former CAO in rural Manitoba accused of stealing $500,000 from a rural municipality has had her wages garnished. It happened in Gilbert Plains. We'll tell you more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Your drive so far is okay. If not, though, please report it to us, 788-3093. Clear and 4 degrees in Winnipeg. It's going to be a sunny day and a high of 12, which is above normal for this time of year. Coming up in the next hour of Information Radio, 2 Winnipeg writers wrote about their experiences being Asian in Winnipeg, and it generated a lot of reaction they did not expect, including anger. So we're going to hear more about that after 7 o'clock. Also, after 7 o'clock, we asked you why you love libraries, and boy, you filled our listener lines. We've got some wonderful stories to share about local libraries and the ones that you care about. Plus, we have more political analysis coming up after what was happening over the weekend, which was the Liberals who have been gathering. So we're going to hear more about what happened in their discussions. Pardon me, I'm looking specifically for the name of our guest, and I'm not finding it. Sarah Ritchie, there it is. Sarah Ritchie's going to join us in the next hour. So stay tuned. We're going to dig into what happened at the caucus meeting and what it means for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau moving forward and his party. Stay with us.
Today on The Current.
Hello to Michigan.
It is so good to be back in Michigan.
We are in the swing state of Michigan, Canada's top trading partner among U.S. states and the heart of the American auto industry. Voters here are divided and nervous about their jobs and their futures. The View from Michigan, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will announce new reductions to immigration targets later today. CBC News has learned the projected number of permanent residents is expected to be cut by nearly 20%. For more on this, the CBC's Janice McGregor joins me from Ottawa. Janice, what can you tell us?
Marcia, sources have confirmed to us, reporting yesterday in the National Post, that the revised immigration levels expected to be tabled in the House of Commons today are going to significantly cut the number of permanent residents that Canada approves for not only 2025, but the 2 years after that as well. This is a substantial course correction that follows a series of other recent moves to reduce the share of people that live in Canada temporarily as well. Earlier this year, the immigration minister changed eligibility rules, cut back on visa approvals for international students. Earlier this week, rules were tightened to make it harder and more expensive for employers to use temporary foreign workers instead of hiring locally. From welcoming Syrian refugees at the start of Justin Trudeau's government to scaling up to fix labor shortages in the wake of COVID, open immigration policy has been a Liberal legacy. But what was previously seen as a positive has bloated into a significant economic problem without the housing supply, the healthcare, or other social services to properly integrate so many newcomers. So politically, the Prime Minister now finds himself playing defense.
As we see the situation shift, as the labor market shifts, we're making changes to the immigration system so that we can keep its support.
Speaker, there's nothing compassionate about it. Inviting people without a place for them to live or health care for them to have or jobs that provide them with paychecks.
So the timing of all of this is pretty significant.
Oh, it's an understatement, not only because recent polls suggest that what had been a political consensus in Canada that immigration is a benefit to this country has been fraying under the strain of socioeconomic pressures and, frankly, stressed out people needing something to blame. But for Trudeau personally, this is the morning after his extraordinary confrontation with MPs on his own bench who told him in plain language yesterday that their constituents want him to go. He did not take questions from reporters yesterday. We'll see if he has anything to say today about his future.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Chad, one of the poorest countries in the world, is facing what is being described as a critical and unprecedented refugee crisis. In the first week of October, some 25,000 people arrived in eastern Chad. They're fleeing intensifying violence and hunger in Sudan. As Anna Cunningham reports, many are arriving severely malnourished.
18 months of civil war in Sudan between the army and the paramilitaries. Now a surge in refugees.
It is an unprecedented crisis for Chad.
Sarah Gordon-Gibson, the UN World Food Programme's country director, spoke to the CBC from Chad's capital, N'Djamena.
The majority of the new arrivals of refugees are severely malnourished.
The UN's refugee agency warns the total number fleeing Sudan into Chad within the next few weeks is likely to pass 3 million.
We can see that in the camps receiving new arrivals, there are high rates of malnutrition.
The majority, Gordon Gibson says, are women and children. In a displacement camp in Sudan's western Darfur region, famine has already been declared. Filippo Grandi, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, speaking recently in Geneva, expressed his desperation.
In Sudan and the region too, we do what we can. But we feel a sense of powerlessness.
This year's rainy season brought severe flooding to parts of Chad, leaving some refugee camps muddied wastelands. In addition to the 682,000 refugees already registered, Gordon Gibson says daily arrivals are multiplying.
250,000 are still near the border on the Chadian side.
She says $173 million in funding is needed to support refugees over the next 6 months.
There is an urgent need for peace in Sudan.
But there is little sign from either side that they are willing to come to the negotiating table. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Vladimir Putin has presided over a closing session of the Brics summit. The Russian president hosted a 3-day meeting of the bloc of developing economies. The event appears to suggest the Western sanctions over Ukraine have not successfully isolated Russia. The member nations also looked for areas of cooperations to counter Western dominance. Crystal Gomansing has this roundup of the summit.
Vladimir Putin drawing attention to Palestinian and Israeli bloodshed, describing the Middle East as being on the brink of full-scale war. The theme of the Brics summit is fair world order. That had the Russian president calling for an expanded role of Asian, African, and Latin American countries in the UN Security Council. Jim O'Neill coined the term BRIC in 2001 when he was chief economist with Goldman Sachs. He was drawing attention to the economic growth potential of Brazil, Russia, India, and China, but now says they've done little to harness their power.
If they wanted to be really serious about economic matters, why don't they genuinely pursue less tariff-based trade between each other? I'll treat the BRICS group seriously when I see signs that the two countries that really matter, China and India, actually really trying to agree on things rather than effectively trying to confront each other all the time.
Iran attended the summit for the first time this year. China's President Xi Jinping welcomed it to the group, calling Iran a good friend and partner. China says it's willing to work with Iran, just two of the nations pledging new economic partnerships, deals that could improve economies such as Russia as it tries to work around Western sanctions. Putin, in his final address, used Ukraine as an example of how outside forces want the strategic defeat of Russia and how that won't happen. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
The U.S. election is just a week and a half away. The presidential candidates are aggressively trying to pull voters onto their side. On Wednesday, Kamala Harris described Donald Trump as, quote, increasingly unhinged and unstable. She says her Republican rival wants unchecked power. And then during a CNN town hall meeting hosted by Anderson Cooper last night, Harris was asked this.
You've quoted General Milley calling Donald Trump a fascist. You yourself have not used that word to describe him. Let me ask you tonight, do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And I also believe that the people who know him best on this subject should be trusted.
Her reference there at the end relates to comments made by John Kelly. He was Trump's longest-serving chief of staff. In interviews with U.S. media, Kelly said Trump praised Adolf Hitler while in office and put personal loyalty above the Constitution. Trump responded with a post to his Truth Social platform saying Harris has a warped mind and is a threat to democracy. Many tenants across Canada are still struggling with rent evictions, poor living conditions, and rent hikes. Some have rebelled with protests on the street to voice their concerns. As Kimberly Ivany reports, some landlords have responded to those protests with lawsuits.
All these blankets we had to use because it's very cold.
70-year-old Mohammed Nizam points to a tall pile of blankets in his Toronto home. He says last winter, heat was a constant problem in his apartment building, an issue, he says, his landlord ignored. So he and his neighbors protested outside a business owned by their landlord. 2 months later, they were hit with a lawsuit, the landlord seeking $200,000 in damages for hurting her business's reputations.
We didn't harm anybody. We didn't damage to their business.
Lawyer Danica So represents Nizam and the other tenants.
It's definitely an escalation in the tools that landlords have at their disposal to try and stop tenants from engaging in their expressive rights.
CBC News found several similar lawsuits across Canada in the last 3 years. Landlords claiming that protesting tenants defamed them. Ricardo Tranjan is with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives.
I think the defamation suits are more an illustration of the fact that landlords are not willing to negotiate.
Nizam says he won't cower.
We will not be silenced. We will fight for our right.
CBC News reached out to his landlord, Anne DeMello. In a statement, she said significant monies have gone into building improvements. But, she says, the tenants still resort to tactics. The case will be in an Ontario court next week. Kimberly Ivany, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the landlord's latest tactics in public battles with tenants is the most read story at cbcnews.ca. That is on our main page. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and the app and YouTube. You're on CBC's Information Radio. Going to have a nice day ahead. This hour on the show, months after her son was attacked with a machete, a Winnipeg mother says provincial support has left her in the dark.
It just feels disrespectful, and you're already going through the worst time of your life. Just to find that there's no real support is really disappointing.
We'll hear from her. That's coming up this hour on the program. In addition, this hour, 2 Winnipeg writers wrote about their experiences being Asian in Winnipeg. It generated a lot of reaction they did not expect. They said they expected some pushback. They did not expect anger. That story is straight ahead. Stay with us. 7:11, Heather Wells is in with other news. Good morning.
Good morning. A former broker for Winnipeg's Shindico Realty has testified in court he has seen documents indicating the company's president paid an $85,000 bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service, Phil Sheagle. The former broker, John Pearson, is suing Shindico's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. Winnipeg police say it's unfortunate, but they had no choice but to shoot and kill a dog that attacked and injured 4 people in Elmwood on Tuesday. We'll hear more in our next news at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Here's Abby with the full forecast.
Good morning. Across the province today, we're going to see sunny conditions in the south with a few clouds developing later, while the north will see some rain and transition to light snow. Currently, Winnipeg, 4 degrees, sunny skies in the forecast. We see a transition to a mix of sun and clouds and breezy conditions. And then for tonight, we're deep down to 2 degrees. In all the regions, we're seeing these sunny conditions staying in the southern part. 4 degrees in Winnipeg right now, -4 in Brandon and Thompson, Churchill at -2. Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach all hovering near 1 at this time.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And it's time to check the commute with Corey Funk. How's it going?
Really quiet commute actually so far here in the city. Haven't heard of any major issues out there, which is okay with me because I imagine as soon as it gets cold, it's going to get a little more gnarly out there on the roads. But if you see something going on right now, do let me know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, that leaves us time to talk about the issues that are happening in our homes. And this, I suspect, a lot of listeners can relate to. Corey and I have had a battle with a particular little creature going on. What's happening?
We've had, I think, now 7 mice in our house since, I think, late September or so. And then and it's like we have a cat, so he deals with them. But we'll come home like after being out for the evening, and there's just like a dead mouse in the middle of the floor, and it's just like, oh.
Here's how I started my morning. So my house has like a skinny hallway at the back door. So when the whole family's there, you're all feeling it. My whole family is me and my husband, 2 little dogs. So I'm getting ready to leave for work. It's 4:45, whatever, and I'm back there, have some lockers beside me with my coat and scarf, that kind of thing. So now I'm standing there in this skinny hallway and I'm facing my husband because he's come down with the dogs. The dogs are between us sitting, waiting to go out. And I say, okay, have a good day. Love you. I reach over to grab my jacket and I pull my jacket off and I just go, and I drop my jacket and there's this tiny little mouse just sitting there, but not moving. And I'm thinking, oh, it's a dead mouse. I look at my husband, he goes, what's going on? And then he sees it and he goes, and he drops his jacket. And now we're like, please, dogs, please don't go after the mouse. Mouse starts to twitch a little, like moving. Yeah. So I'm like, please. So we grabbed, Jean-Paul was quick thinking, he went in and grabbed a box from the kitchen. He had like a sort of one of those boxes you get like pastries in if you're somewhere. Dump whatever was in there out, scoops up this mouse who must have been stunned from some poison or something, and outside it went, but yeah, right? Ugh, sorry, listeners. It's not how you want to start your morning, but
No.
We're not the only ones.
No, it was 2 a.m. I was there with the baby on my chest sitting on a chair, and I hear a squeak, 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 squeak. And then my cat decides to chase after this mouse. And there I am with the baby on my chest watching this cat just throw this mouse around the house.
Yeah.
I run upstairs and have to deal with it, chasing this cat around, and this who likes to eventually finish the job, but it was bad.
The awesome realities of Manitoba in the fall. So you know where we're going with this. What's going on in your life? 788-3205 if you're not too squidgy to share. Today's high, as Abby just mentioned, will be 12 degrees. So just reiterating how much above normal that is for this time of year. Well, let's turn our attention to much more serious matters, and a warning that our first story this half hour references acts of racism. We're about to meet 2 Asian Canadians who wrote editorials about being Asian in Manitoba. Lisa Wong and Jenny Hagen-Wills are both instructors at the University of Winnipeg, and they're renowned authors. And they're used to feedback, but they said they did not expect the anger in reaction to what they wrote, their pieces, once they were posted on CBC Manitoba's website. After that, they decided to sit together and to talk it out. They invited CBC Manitoba to record that conversation. They say they are forever foreigners.
It's like, it's unstoppable.
I know. I just got one, I think, from someone who was a student. Just wrote me about their whole life story.
Oh my God.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Wong. I'm the author of The Woo Woo. And I wrote a first-person piece in May about moving from Vancouver to Winnipeg. Vancouver has a predominantly Asian population, and so when I moved here, I was really shocked by some of the experiences that I had as a non-white person.
And I'm Jenny Cajun Wills. I wrote Older Sister, Not Necessarily Related. I'm a Korean-Canadian adoptee. I also wrote a first-person piece for CBC about being Asian in Winnipeg, in Manitoba, and I know we sort of communicated and bonded over our experiences, mostly in terms of the responses to those pieces.
Yeah, I come from a creative writing background where readers usually tell you how much they love your work, right? They don't tell you that it is your fault for something happening. And when the piece came out, I think I got 30, 40 emails just an hour right after, and then I kept getting messages and DMs from people. I think, Jenny, we were both invited to a farm. Someone wanted to be friends with us, and they sympathized with our situation. But the piece wasn't about friendship. It really wasn't about meeting new people.
And I think, where that invitation, kind as it is, kind of misses the mark.
Yeah, because friendship doesn't necessarily mean that the racism is fixed, right? We're not saying that the people are unfriendly or unwelcoming. We're saying that racism is part of a societal problem.
In my case, I often receive messages from adoptive parents who say, but your life turned out okay, right? Or, but it wasn't so bad, or, but would you have rather have been, suffering away in an orphanage overseas, which is in and of itself a strange colonial narrative or myth.
It's just part of the narrative, I guess, that they want you to feel grateful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And absolutely, as an adopted person, this narrative of being grateful and being beholden is almost like part of my identity. And so it takes a lot to resist that.
I've even had people of color tell me that I'm imagining these experiences that I've had. This other email says, "Hello, Lindsay. I read your CBC piece about racism in Winnipeg. I'm also full-blooded Asian, Japanese, born and raised in Winnipeg, but moved to Vancouver in 1979. And they talk about saying that it doesn't exist. And they tell me that I returned to Winnipeg last fall for 5 days after more than 20 years of absence to attend a high school reunion, but didn't experience one incident of racism, yet I look just like you." It's almost like they want to change my mind, right? Mm-hmm. They want me to email them back and say, "You're right, actually, this didn't happen."
Yeah. Well, that's like gaslighting to begin with, to tell you that something is in your head that's, that you're feeling in real life.
Here's one email. "If you're experiencing racism, that means Canadians don't want you here. The solution is to go back to your own people where you belong." So where do I belong, right? Are they saying go back to Vancouver? Are they saying go back to Hong Kong? I mean, I was born and raised in Vancouver, right? And there's a large Asian population there. So it almost doesn't make sense, that anger.
I didn't go back to Korea until 2009, I think, to meet my Korean family for the first time. But I have no language skills, no cultural knowledge. And so it's like when your race is coded as non-belonging here, but your ethnicity makes you not belong there. You're left somewhere in the middle.
Right. There's really no home for people of the diaspora in many ways. And you're always trying to convince people that you either speak English, you're Canadian, or you're born here. And I think when I came to Winnipeg, everyone asked me, like, where are you from? Yeah, Forever Foreigner might be the right title for this episode.
Yeah, I think so. And they seem to forget, I think, our responsibilities to Indigenous peoples in the lands that we occupy. So it puts us in the uncomfortable place of having to say, well, I belong here, whereas here is on stolen land.
And that also brings me to this from readers as well, who are saying that it's because you look Indigenous, that's why it's happening to you, which is so bizarre to me and so disturbing on many levels.
Right, not least because it's normalizing anti-Indigenous racism here, and also assuming that Asian diasporic people would then be complicit in that sort of false hierarchy of racism.
And it's not just white people saying that, white readers. A lot of Indigenous people are saying, like, it's because you look like us. That's what's happening to you, and we've accepted it, right?
Right.
A lot of internalized racism as well, which is like really, really heartbreaking. One of our colleagues came up to me and was saying like they don't even notice the racism anymore, right? Because they've been in Winnipeg longer than I have, right? There's obviously a need for people to talk about race, right? I think a lot of people feel unheard. I'm not talking about the people who are telling me to go back to Vancouver or Hong Kong.
No, they're very heard.
Yes, they're very
They've been heard their whole lives.
Yes. I'm wondering, like, what are some ways that people could address these issues?
Like a possible outcome would be like talking about how this is just like the beginning of this thread of the conversation, like that this isn't like a one-off event, like to take all of these opportunities and continue the discussion with or without other people involved, but like for us to be having these conversations even amongst ourselves. The very fact that folks were reading these pieces, I think, is an excellent first step. I mean, we talked about these things long before our first person pieces, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about them later.
I guess we should go to class now.
I mean, there's always more teaching to do.
Important conversation to listen to there for obvious reasons. Those were the voices of Jenny Hagen-Wills and Lindsay Wong. If you want to see more in the story, you can go to our website right now at cbc.ca/Manitoba. You can tune into CBC Television News at 6 tonight as well. I want to just take the question that they posed at the end of that piece and put it to you for the listener line this morning. So where do we go from here? What do we do with that? 788-3205.
Your neighborhood. Your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Sometimes if you want someone to do, you need to say don't. Like when you're selling squishy softness.
Charmin's so squeezably soft, it's irresistible. Please, don't squeeze the Charmin.
Or promoting pickpocket protection.
If they're lost or stolen, you can get them back. Don't leave home without them.
Don't Do It Advertising, Part 2, on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
How you doing this morning? Thursday, October 24th already. School day number 6 on the cycle. Clear and 4 degrees in Winnipeg. It is calm, and we're going to head for a high of 12 with lots of sunshine. Well, it is time for morning sports. Scott Reguera is standing by and joins us now via Zoom. Hello to you.
Good morning, Marcy.
So some familiar names as the Bombers announced their nominees for the CFL Player Awards.
Yeah, Terrell Ford, Stanley Bryant, Sergio Castillo, Ontario Wilson nominated for the most outstanding defensive player, O-lineman, special teams player, and rookie, respectively. But maybe the least surprising name, Marcy, is the team's nominee for both the Outstanding Player Award and Top Canadian. That is Brady Oliveira. The Winnipeg native's already recorded his third straight 1,000-yard-plus campaign and all but secured his second consecutive rushing title. Stats are great. But Brady, who almost, remember, wasn't re-signed because of cap restraints, is just happy this is all happening for his hometown team.
Everyone knows I want to be in Winnipeg. It's my hometown. You still need to feel wanted, right? It's still your business and your career, and you want to go to a place where you feel wanted. There was a time in that off-season stage where I was feeling a lot more love from other teams and not the team that I wanted to feel that love from. So I'm just extremely happy when I was going through that stage in the off-season that we were able to get it done with the right team, and that's right here.
You hear the ping pong balls behind him? I wonder if he was playing as he was being interviewed. if he's just kind of like Forrest Gump. Anyway, I digress. Oliveira will have to wait a week, Marcy, to see if he is named the Western Division finalist for either of those awards. Those will be announced on Halloween, by the way. And before that, there's a bigger issue, and that's Saturday's game against Montreal, a possible Grey Cup preview where a win or a draw for the Bombers will clinch the Western Division. So look forward to that.
Let's go to the Raptors. Their season got started last night. How they do against Cleveland?
Well, Toronto looked good. And when I say that, Marcy, I mean those throwback purple uniforms they were wearing to commemorate their 30th anniversary. As for the quality of their play, well, let's just say the ferocious velociraptor on their jerseys seemed like false advertising. If you're wondering, what is that? Scientists say a Parasaurolophus made that sound. What's a Parasaurolophus? It's a massive herbivore with tiny little teeth. And the dino that should have been on their jerseys last night because they got beaten by 30 points by Cleveland, the worst defeat they've ever had in a home opener, Marcy. And Canadian Chris Boucher was left to make sense of it.
We got slapped in the face, and it's probably good for us, especially as young as we are, just realizing that we got to play 48 minutes, and it's not easy to win games, so I think it's a good way for us to realize that the season is actually started, and we got to play a lot harder than we are right now.
Here's another slap in the face. Toronto lost starting point guard Emmanuel Quickly to a bruised pelvis in the first half last night, and so he joins R.J. Barrett and Kelly Olynyk among the walking wounded, and it's game one.
Maybe never wear those jerseys again if you're superstitious. I don't know.
That's right. Sell them off.
Yeah. A bunch of them coming up today for auction, maybe. This year's class was inducted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame. What stood out for you there?
Well, I mean, so many choices, but for me it was Vicky Sunahara, Marcy. The Toronto native won 2 Olympic hockey gold medals and 7 world championships. But when she got the call to the hall, she figured it was a prank by one of her ex-teammates. She actually apologized yesterday during her induction speech to the chair of the Hall of Fame, Bob Rooney, for not believing him at first. In a profile CBC's done on Sunahara, she spoke about how grateful she is for the growth of the women's game.
There's been a lot of players who actually gave up their careers for the better of the game. I'm like a proud parent. You always want more for those that come after you. I have so much respect for the players who waited and knew what they wanted and knew what they deserved and what a professional women's hockey league would look like.
Yeah, Sunahara, figure skater Patrick Chan, and tennis player Daniel Nestor were among the athletes inducted yesterday.
All right, nice stuff. Thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
That's Scott Regehr with Morning Sports. Well, just a couple of reminders here. First off, should be decent out there for your drive. But if you are seeing something, please update us, 788-3093. Secondly, wow, we're going to be above normal for today, a high of 12. Lots of sunshine. Right now it's clear and 4. We're also asking you, it is a time of year where the critters start to creep in. Do you have any mouse stories that you want to share? 788-3205. It's kind of an annual thing we like to do, but especially this morning because I woke up to quite a surprise under my scarf in my own old home in Winnipeg. Coming up on the program at 7:40, we're going to dig into some of the federal politics that are happening. We'll dig into what happened specifically at the Liberal caucus meeting and what it means for the Prime Minister and his party going forward. If you were with our show last week, you'll know that Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller was in town, and we asked him about this letter from MPs that were looking to challenge Trudeau's leadership. And he was saying he felt it was passive-aggressive. They should share their concerns with the Prime Minister to his face. Well, that has now happened. Where do we go from here? What do we understand about this letter and who signed it? And what does Trudeau's leadership look like this morning? So that interview is coming up right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 7:30. You'll feel a little chilly. It's 4 degrees, but we're going to warm up above seasonal. Mix of sun and clouds this afternoon and a high of 12. A Winnipeg mother had to wait weeks to find out if her son would get any help as he recovers from a brutal machete attack. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after the attack in August. She has had to take time off work for appointments and pay for special equipment to aid in his recovery. But she says she went weeks without hearing a word from the program that offers compensation for victims of crime.
It just feels disrespectful, and you're already going through the worst time of your life, trying to even keep your own mind straight and on top of everything. And just to find that there's no real support is really disappointing.
It wasn't until CBC contacted the Victim Services Department, Smart says, she got a reply. She says they apologized for the delay and told her they will cover the cost of her expenses. You can hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. A former broker for Shindico Realty testified in court yesterday. He has seen documents indicating the company's president paid a bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service. CBC's Bartley Kivas reports.
John Pearson is suing Shindico's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. Pearson said in the statement of claim he ended a brokerage association with Shindico in 2022, partly because of what he called negative media attention on Shindico President Sandy Schindelman and Vice President Robert Schindelman. Pearson also claimed in the statement the Schindelmans were alleged to be involved in political corruption. In a statement of defense, the Schindelmans denied that claim. During cross-examination Wednesday, Pearson testified he was provided documents from the Schindelmans' legal counsel that indicate that Sandy Schindelman paid an $85,000 bribe to former Winnipeg CAO Phil Shiegel. Pearson testified this was related to a fire paramedic station in Sage Creek. Outside court, the lawyer for the Schindelmans declined to comment on Pearson's testimony. CBC News also asked Shiegel for comment but did not hear back. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Winnipeg police say they had no choice but to shoot and kill a large dog that had injured 3 adults and a 16-year-old girl in Elmwood. It happened Tuesday afternoon on Stadacona near Talbot. The dog was running loose when the attacks happened. The 16-year-old girl required a tourniquet because of serious upper body injuries. Constable Claude Chancy says when police arrived, the dog continued to be aggressive.
Unfortunately, the dog is deceased. It is something that our officers had to deal with in a very quick moment. This is a very large dog, from my understanding, that was loose, had caused some severe injuries to 4 individuals, one of them being a 16-year-old youth.
The girl was taken by ambulance to hospital. The owner of the dog and animal services has been notified. A former CAO accused of stealing $500,000 from a Western Manitoba municipality has had her wages garnished. Amber Fisher was ordered to hand over her wages to pay off nearly $550,000 taken from the municipality of Gilbert Plains. The order came after Fisher failed to file a statement of defense in response to a lawsuit by the municipality. The RM of Gilbert Plains accused her of stealing through a phony cyber attack. Reeve Jim Mansure says they are waiting for RCMP to finish a criminal investigation into the missing money.
We have, a few new counselors since this started originally, and I think most people are anxious to see the results of the investigation become public, and hopefully soon that'll happen.
Manitoba RCMP spokesperson Tara Seal says no charges have been filed against Fisher. After ramping up the country's immigration numbers in recent years, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will announce details today of his government's plan to reverse course.
As we see the situation shift, as the labor market shifts, we're making changes to the immigration system so that we can keep its support.
That's the Prime Minister in the House of Commons yesterday, hinting changes are coming. Today, CBC News confirms he will announce the specifics, including reducing the number of immigrants being welcomed into the country by more than 100,000 over the next 2 years. The government originally opened its immigration policy to meet the country's labor demands and for humanitarian reasons. Well, days ahead of a series of Taylor Swift concerts, a homeless encampment is being cleared out near the Superdome in New Orleans. State officials say with the upcoming Swift concerts and the Super Bowl in February, moving the camp to another location will, quote, help the city put its best foot forward. A number of New Orleans city councilors are calling the initiative disturbing. They also say it's disruptive to those looking to finalize long-term housing plans. You can find more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8 and more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells. details.
You're welcome.
And now our regional forecast from CBC.
Across the region, we'll see sunny conditions in the south with a few clouds developing later, while the north will see rain and then a transition to light snow. Winnipeg right now, 4 degrees. Beautiful day ahead. We head to a high of 12. Brandon at -4. Thompson at -4. It's going to be sunny there. Brandon is going to see a high of 13 later. Thompson gets to a high of 4. Churchill 2 heading to a high of 0. While down south, we're seeing Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach and Morris all hovering between near -2 at this time, and temperatures will be getting to close to 13 degrees for those regions.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Abby Adiyemi with our forecast, and now Corey's in with your commute.
A really quiet commute overall so far. I actually haven't heard of any major issues, but if you're out there, you're walking, biking, driving, you see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, I'm glad it's quiet because it'll let us go to our listener lines. Yesterday was National Library, what we recognized on the show, National Library Month. We were talking about it yesterday, and I was off, but I understand you guys were asking about people's thoughts on libraries?
Yeah, we just asked a very simple question. Why do you love libraries? And we got way more calls than we could have fit on the show yesterday, so we mashed a bunch of them together, and here they are.
Yeah, my name's Jason. I was close to homelessness because of some family tragedy, and I didn't have any money to have internet and all that kind of stuff to apply for jobs. And, you know, I scrounged up enough money to get a library pass, and the library was kind of my safe haven to get back into the job market and be successful. And I will always have a great memory of our downtown library because of that. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Liz. Love libraries, and in particular, my love of libraries has led me to, at an advanced age in a career, to actually go back to university. And the librarians at the university have really, really helped me to understand how to put my wisdom into kind of sort through it, and to help me with my classwork and coursework in order to make progress towards a PhD. And so I would suggest that anyone whoever has a lot of knowledge, and librarians can help us sort through that and to learn more. So good luck to everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Hello, this is Shayna Clout. Libraries are amazing. I remember as a little kid going to the libraries all the time. There would be a big bathtub with some carpet inside, and I would come with a big, huge stack of books and crawl in with my mom. I was a single mom, and we would read books together. Now, as a mom, I do the same thing. I bring my kids to libraries all over. I'm glad we can eat snacks in them now. One thing I didn't hear you talk about that's also really important is out of prison libraries. The federal government requires that there's libraries in all the prisons. The provincial government does not. So there's actually an all-volunteer run prison library committee here in Manitoba that has managed to get books and staff that can help with the books, and some sort of a space where you could actually read the books in all of the prisons, provincial jails, here in Manitoba, including the one that's in Winnipeg, which is the remand center, but also in the more rural parts. All volunteer-led, definitely needs support. Definitely give a shout out.
Hi, my name is Laura Loss, and I found out recently that I just love libraries because they're such an amazing resource for the community, and everything's free, which is insane in this day and age. And I found out recently that the Millennium Library here in Winnipeg has physical resources to use. They have a 3D printer and sewing machines, like industrial sewing machines, like sergers, and it's incredible that material exists. I live in an apartment, and I have no space for a sewing machine in my home. So I think it's amazing that those types of things are available for the community. So I love libraries.
Hi there. My name is Jethro Bartolings. My wife and my 2 daughters and I just love the library so much because it's a place where we can learn about the world. It's a place where we can explore all the different types of stories and the creativity of people who want to share their ideas. And so my daughters are avid readers now at age 8 and 10, and they became that because we read to them, and we were able to get so many books, endless books from the library, to expose them to different types of stories and different people and different lives that people live. And so that has been a special part and continues to be a special part of what goes on in our home. And so we have something that we do during the springtime called Battle of the Books, where my wife organizes selecting a whole stack of books that we go through in spring break. And each day we read 2 books, and we have to choose which is our favorite. And at the end of spring break, we have to decide which book wins Battle of the Books. And that's just one of the things that we do in our house. But we love reading. We love to read. We love our Henderson Library and the wonderful people that work there. And I just wanted to share that with you. And I hope you all have a great day. And Popeye Library.
We're going to have a better day because of all those calls. What a range of reasons that you connect with libraries in our city and in your communities across Manitoba. I loved the calls. And as Corey said, we only got on like a handful of what you called in with. So if you want to keep calling about your love of libraries in this National Library Month, 788-3205. It is 7:41 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio. And questions continue to swirl about just what happened yesterday at the Liberal caucus meeting. For a moment here, let's just dip into what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said as he emerged from this meeting.
Liberal Party is strong and united.
But a letter signed by 24 MPs calling for Trudeau to go does exist. So what does this mean for Justin Trudeau and his leadership? For more today and the latest developments this morning, Sarah Ritchie's with us, Ottawa News editor for the Canadian Press. And I should correctly inform you, I spoke with Sarah Ritchie today a little bit earlier.
Good morning.
So what do we know about what happened behind closed doors at the Liberal caucus meeting?
Not a whole lot. Members of the caucus were pretty tight-lipped about what happened yesterday as they sort of walked down that noisy hallway of reporters shouting questions at them. Look, from the outside looking in, we knew the meeting was very long. It was over 3 hours. That's significantly longer than the usual weekly caucus meeting. MPs told us that they had on their agenda supposed to be a briefing from their new national campaign director. They did not get that. They spent the entire time talking about this. Ken Hardy estimated that about 50 people stood up to speak. Some of them talked in favor of Justin Trudeau staying on as leader, and others talked in favor of this letter and him, leaving the leadership. We know that this letter was read to Justin Trudeau, and we know that he responded in the meeting. So these are the things that we know, but the specifics, everybody's been pretty quiet about that so far. One of the things that emerged much later yesterday afternoon is that the group of MPs who did sign this letter to Justin Trudeau have given him a deadline of sorts. They want an answer from him. They want him to think about his leadership, think about his future, and give them an answer by Monday. And so that's something that we will definitely have to watch for.
It's interesting because it just happened that the immigration minister, federal immigration minister, Mark Miller, was in Winnipeg, and we had him in studio, and we asked him about this letter. And he last week was saying, he thought that, I'm going to quote it, he called the attempt to oust the Prime Minister, quote, passive aggressive, and went on to say it was weak. So, but part of that was because he said they weren't saying things to his face. So now we've had this exchange of people, face to face with Justin Trudeau. Who are these MPs, and how damaging is the letter for the Prime Minister?
Yeah, so they have now talked to Justin Trudeau's face, at least to his face and in front of caucus, but they haven't really been coming out publicly to say who they are. So before yesterday's meeting, we only knew about 3 MPs who had actually said publicly, okay, yes, I signed this letter. So that's Newfoundland MP Ken McDonald, New Brunswick MP Wayne Long, and Prince Edward Island MP Sean Casey. So these 3 have said, that they were interested in signing this, that they gave varying reasons, but essentially the same refrain. And they talked a little bit about kind of the way that this unfolded. Ken McDonald said yesterday he didn't know how many people had signed exactly because he signed his name on the top of a blank page. And that's sort of the common refrain we were hearing from them, which gives you some insight into how all of this unfolded. Because as you pointed out, it was very much behind closed doors. Everybody was sort of hush-hush about what was going on. At certain points, we weren't even sure if every MP even knew that this was happening. But the folks who did sign on, I think around 24. It's not an insignificant number of people. They're backbenchers. The cabinet has been very much in support of Justin Trudeau, at least publicly, in the things that they have said. And so that's pretty much all that we know about them so far until more of them decide to, come forward and talk about all of this.
It's very interesting watching this from Manitoba because our NDP party actually had a leadership challenge that was very public many years ago that was unusual at the provincial level. And now we're watching sort of something similar, not exactly the same, but happened federally. How much is the internal squabbling a gift for the other parties?
Well, I think the other parties certainly feel that it is a gift. Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh had a press conference yesterday, just exclusively got together a bunch of his MPs and talked to reporters, and just to say, hey, the Liberals are over there fighting about their own future. They're clearly focused on the wrong things. We're paying attention to the things that you care about, trying to make the case to Canadians once again that they're a viable alternative not only to the Liberals but also to the federal Conservatives who have been leading in the polls for more than a year. The Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, in question period, I don't know if anyone tuned in, but he looked positively gleeful at points when he was poking at the Prime Minister about, what he was calling chaos in the Liberal caucus and essentially making the case that Justin Trudeau can't even keep, things on the rails within his own house and saying he needs to call an election. He clearly isn't capable of governing. I think these are the things that we're going to continue to hear from the opposition parties. They're going to try to take advantage of what they see as an opportunity. If the Liberals are divided, as MP Judy Scrow said yesterday, if we look divided, we look weak. And I think that's how the opposition parties are seeing it for sure.
Where do we go from here? I mean, we also have a House that has given Justin Trudeau an end-of-the-month deadline, that Bloc Québécois suggestion on the table that is around finances and such in a particular bill. And then we have, you said, a deadline from these MPs in this letter. So what are you watching for in the days and weeks ahead, Sarah?
So I think it's no coincidence that these deadlines are very close together, right? So the Bloc Québécois has given the government until October 29th to pass two pieces of legislation, including one that would raise old age security payments for seniors under 75. The government has shown no willingness to do that. They say they're still talking to the Bloc, but it is clear that they are not going to pass that piece of private members' bill from the Bloc Québécois. So at the deadline for the Bloc, they will begin talks with the Conservatives and the NDP about bringing down the government. That's their pledge. Now these MPs have given Justin Trudeau until the 28th of October to make a decision about his leadership. What will happen after that, they haven't really specified, at least not publicly. But there are options available to them. If 24 members of Parliament were, for example, to walk away from the Liberal caucus and sit as independents, that would certainly change things inside the House of Commons, which is in a minority situation that's already very precarious. Or they have the option as well to choose to vote against the government on different issues, including on confidence issues. So that's something that Ken McDonald said yesterday is always on the table. He said he didn't think he was considering it that was before the meeting, but he did say it's a tool available to any MP, and it's something that's on the table for this group of discontented members of Parliament. So what happens next, I think, is a little bit up to Justin Trudeau and a little bit up to this group. But I do think that each one of these moves in this sort of chess game brings us a little bit closer to an early election is how it's feeling.
All right. Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sarah Ritchie, I spoke with her at 6. She's the Ottawa News editor for the Canadian Press. More coming up on World Report. Right now it's 11 minutes to 8 o'clock. Well, let's get more information on a story you may have heard in our local news today. Over the summer, Winnipegger Megan Smart's 15-year-old son was attacked with a machete. He survived, but he did suffer life-altering injuries. And although he qualifies for Manitoba's compensation for victims of crime program, Smart says she hasn't been reimbursed for her expenses, and she hadn't heard from the province in almost a month. Her bills are piling up, and she wants to know why the program, in her view, has left her in the dark. CBC's Mike Arsenault sat down with her in her home to learn more.
The first night, there was a social worker at the hospital who approached me with all of the papers and told me, this program is in place for victims and that, they're going to be able to help us through the process. Not only the financial end of things and the recovery and mental recovery as well, for mental health, but also in the court process, because that's obviously something that's going to be coming up at some point. It was like the first night It took me it was quite a few days until things could settle down enough that I could sit down and fill out all the paperwork, because it was very extensive and you had to have quite detailed notes in it and everything else from the incident and stuff like this. So filled that all out, we actually delivered it by hand to victim services themselves, just thinking, that would expedite the process. And since then, it's just been a lack of communication. And I think it's been almost 3-4 weeks now since I've heard anything from them. And I've sent numerous emails as well as phone calls to supervisors and so forth. And no one seems to be returning the calls at this point. But I was told that, they don't want to cover travel expenses, because we do have numerous appointments with physiotherapists and 2 surgeons as well that we're seeing once a month. And then we've got 2 sets of physio, one for his legs and one for his arms. So it's constant travel back and forth, which is costly, of course. And these are expenses I wouldn't have had this not happened, So it just feels like I'm kind of getting stonewalled a bit there. And for something that's supposed to be there to support, it really feels like at first they're, right in there and they're there for you emotionally and there to help you and help you figure out how to fill out the papers. And then after that, it just falls short.
What are some of the things that they're falling short on?
One, the travel expenses, for sure. So, we take cabs to the hospital because it just makes more sense for parking-wise and stuff to take the cab, because it would cost me just as much to drive. There was things that I had to buy, like a bath chair that was supposed to be put in place so that home care could come and give him baths, which we didn't end up being given a caseworker to be able to cover the bathing. We did get the bandage changes, which lasted about a week and a half at home. There was so many bills that came up, things that we were told were covered. Even going forward, like I have a prescription for the scar massage and so forth, but of course those all cost money. And it says right on their website and on their papers that they gave me that they do cover these things specifically as long as you have prescriptions and so forth. So I've gotten all the prescriptions, I have receipts, and I'm just not seeing any communication as to if they're going to cover anything or what kind of timeline even that we're looking at for when they do approve of these things.
Not only are you not getting a refund, but you haven't heard anything.
Exactly. I would say the end of September is when the communication stopped. And even before that, it was really hard to get a hold of anyone. I'm not sure where the disconnect is or why. It's disappointing because I've done all of the due diligence going forward and I've saved every receipt that I'm supposed to save, and it's just like there's just no response. It's not even a yes or no, or here's the things we can help with. You can go forward and get more receipts or something. It's just complete silence.
Have you been reimbursed for any of the things you're out of pocket for?
Well, not a reimbursement. They direct paid the ambulance bill because I had sent them that, and I said, that was $250. That's something I didn't have on hand at the time. And I said, it clearly states that they will do the ambulance on their website and in their papers. I think it was almost a month or month and a half afterwards they finally did pay for it, after I'd already received a letter saying it hadn't still been paid. So I was like, okay, what's going on? And I'd even called them back at that point and still had no answer, but eventually I did get a receipt that said that the ambulance had been paid, so that's how I knew it was paid.
Obviously these reimbursements are important to you, they'd be important to anybody, but this whole situation has it's compromised your ability to work already.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of appointments, and so I did have to scale back my hours at work. Where I was working part-time, I went down to 7 hours a week just so that I could fit in all the appointments and so forth. And also, within the first 2 months, I had to be there for Brody to make meals and so forth. I mean, because he couldn't really serve himself because he couldn't use his hands, and help him with his daily hygiene and everything else. So it was, scale back the hours as much as I could. I still needed to keep some hours in place, obviously. I am a single mom and supporting myself and my 3 kids at home. So yeah, it's been financially really tough just to make, my regular ends meet and accommodate all of the everything, like the travel, all the extra, specialty foods and things that he needs to eat and whatever. It's it all adds up. And so yeah, I've had to take time off work. I have been picking up more hours as I can in between appointments, but it does make for a very busy week schedule as well, trying to balance all of it.
How do you want to see this resolved moving forward?
Well, it may not do anything for me right off the hop. But going forward, I hope it helps the system realize that there is a missing link here. And there are other people out there, I'm sure, that are going through the same situation that I am. I'm just hoping going forward that it can help them to at least help other victims and be more on top of things and be more considerate. Because I just find it just feels disrespectful, and you're already going through the worst time of your life, trying to even keep your own mind straight and on top of everything. And just to find that there's no real support is really disappointing, and I know they talk a lot about mental health too, but what they're doing affects people's mental health, 100%. So going forward, I hope they can change the system for the better to make it work for everyone involved. It's like they make me feel like I'm not a victim either. Yes, my son is the victim. It affected all of us, as a whole family. It affected the entire family, not just my son. And we're doing everything we can to support his recovery. It's only been, almost 3 months, I guess. He's finally able to make a fist with one hand. So he's able to move. He's got some movement back. The nerves are starting to come back. The other hand where the finger was severed, it's going to take a little while still. But, we've got lots of exercises that he's working on, although he's kind of put it into his own way of doing things, where he's, video gaming. So it's getting that motion back on his own. Being a teenage boy, video games, well, no brainer. He has been going out with some friends, walking around in the neighborhood, and just, being a teenager again. I can't tell you how much joy it gives me to hear him even laugh with his friends. Just because I honestly, his mental health even has surprised me through the whole thing, where he's just he's still got a good outlook. He's being with his friends, he's still socializing, he's laughing, he's playing video games. The progress that we're seeing in his movements and stuff, it's way beyond what I would have ever thought possible.
Megan Spart with CBC's Mike Arsenault. Now, after CBC Manitoba contacted the province and victim services for comment, the Manitoba Compensation for Victims of Crime program reached out to Smart and says it is able to cover most of her expenses. Smart says someone from the program also apologized for taking so long. She says she's relieved to have some answers after waiting in limbo for almost a month. And if you want to read more on the story, please go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Heather Wells is here now with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg police say it is unfortunate, but they had no choice but to shoot and kill a dog that attacked and injured 4 people in Elmwood Tuesday. Officers say the dog was running loose when the attacks happened. The 16-year-old girl required a tourniquet because of the serious upper body injuries she sustained. A former broker for Winnipeg's Shindico Realty has testified in court he has seen documents indicating the company's president paid an $85,000 bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service, Phil Schiegel. We'll hear more in our next local news at 8:30.
Clear, 4 degrees, a high of 12 with sunshine today in Winnipeg. The commute's good so far, 788-3093, up to 8 o'clock. If you see something, let us know. Coming up, a funny story about a mouse in the house, or maybe not in the house, but we asked for your listener stories about mice. And we're going to learn more about a trend in the workforce, the Great Exhaustion.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Canadian journalist and Dateline correspondent Keith Morrison will be here to remember his stepson Matthew Perry 1 year after his death. Keith will talk about how his family is carrying on Matthew's mission to help people recovering from addiction with a new foundation.
And he really, he so desperately wanted to get better.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
We are in the swing state of Michigan, Canada's top trading partner among U.S. states and the heart of the American auto industry. Voters here are divided and nervous about their jobs and their futures. The View from Michigan, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will announce new reductions to immigration targets later today. CBC News has learned the projected number of permanent residents is expected to be cut by nearly 20%. For more on this, the CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from Ottawa. And Janice, what can you tell us?
Marcia, sources have confirmed to us, reporting yesterday in the National Post, that the revised immigration levels expected to be tabled in the House of Commons today are going to significantly cut the number of permanent residents that Canada approves for not only 2025, but the 2 years after that as well. This is a substantial course correction that follows a series of other recent moves to reduce the share of people that live in Canada temporarily as well. Earlier this year, the immigration minister changed eligibility rules, cut back on visa approvals for international students. Earlier this week, rules were tightened to make it harder and more expensive for employers to use temporary foreign workers instead of hiring locally. From welcoming Syrian refugees at the start of Justin Trudeau's government to scaling up to fix labour shortages in the wake of COVID, open immigration policy has been a Liberal legacy. But what was previously seen as a positive has bloated into a significant economic problem without the housing supply, the healthcare or other social services to properly integrate so many newcomers. So politically, the Prime Minister now finds himself playing defense.
As we see the situation shift, as the labor market shifts, we're making changes to the immigration system so that we can keep its support.
Speaker, there's nothing compassionate about it. Inviting people without a place for them to live or health care for them to have or jobs that provide them with paychecks.
So the timing of all of this is pretty significant.
Oh, it's an understatement, not only because recent polls suggest that what had been a political consensus in Canada that immigration is a benefit to this country has been fraying under the strain of socioeconomic pressures and, frankly, stressed out people needing something to blame. But for Trudeau personally, this is the morning after his extraordinary confrontation with MPs on his own bench who told him in plain language yesterday that their constituents want him to go. He did not take questions from reporters yesterday. We'll see if he has anything to say today about his future.
All right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. A Saskatoon hospital is being investigated for its treatment of an Indigenous elder. Reuben St. Charles says his ponytail was cut off without his permission. He'd been in hospital for a hip problem. As Alexander Silberman reports, Indigenous healthcare advocates want to know how this happened.
It's going to haunt me.
Reuben St. Charles says his fractured hip has healed well, but his experience getting care at a Saskatoon hospital sent him home emotionally shaken. When the Métis elder got into an ambulance in late August, after having a fall, he passed out from the pain. After waking up hours later at the Royal University Hospital, St. Charles touched the back of his head and noticed something was wrong.
And my ponytail was gone, and I started screaming.
The 73-year-old Métis elder had been growing a braid for 30 years for cultural reasons. After St. Charles started asking questions at the hospital, he says nurses behind a curtain began laughing.
Why? Why did they do that to me?
St. Charles received an apology letter from hospital officials, but he says he still doesn't know why his hair was cut or who did it and wants to hear from that person directly. Bonnie Marwood is a patient advocate with the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. She says the incident shows a lack of respect.
For Indigenous people, our hair is more than just a body part. It signifies so much to us.
The Saskatchewan Health Authority told CBC News it apologizes to St. Charles and recognizes cutting hair without permission can invoke past cultural trauma. It says the situation is being treated as a critical incident and an external investigation is underway. Alexander Silberman, CBC News, Regina.
Antony Blinken says he is hopeful talks will resume soon on a ceasefire and the release of hostages in Gaza. The U.S. Secretary of State is in Doha for discussions with Qatari leaders. Blinken says the crisis has reached a pivotal moment in moving Gaza from war to peace.
Israel has accomplished the strategic goals that it set out for itself, making sure that October 7th and the horrors can never happen again by effectively dismantling the military organization of Hamas. It succeeded in doing that, and bringing to justice its leaders, those who perpetrated the horrors of October 7th, notably Sinwar.
Yahya Sinwar is the Hamas leader who was killed in an Israeli strike last week. Blinken also raised the ongoing humanitarian plight of Palestinians. He announced an additional $135 million in aid. He offered no timeline for talks to begin again, only saying they will restart in the coming days. With just a week and a half until the U.S. presidential election, both candidates are pushing to capture the undecided vote.
Vice President, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks. You have a mic right here.
CNN's Anderson Cooper welcomes Kamala Harris to a town hall broadcast in Pennsylvania. The swing state is crucial for both Harris and her Republican rival, Donald Trump. The CBC's Karen Pauls is in Washington this morning. And Karen, how did that town hall go for Harris?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was asked questions by undecided voters ranging from fascism to food prices, immigration, Gaza, and anti-Semitism. She was most passionate when she focused on her Republican rival, saying former President Donald Trump is unstable and unfit to serve, even agreeing with the statement that he's a fascist. But it may be pocketbook issues Americans are more concerned with, like price gouging.
We saw it actually during the pandemic as well, where because of supply chain issues, there was a reduction of supply, and then they would inflate the price of everyday necessities. Not to mention, by the way, again, Donald Trump should be here tonight to talk with you and answer your questions. He's not. He refused to come.
Trump was invited to this originally as a second debate, but he declined.
Donald Trump had a rally of his own in Georgia, another swing state. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Trump's theme in Georgia was border security.
The difference is this border is 10 times, 15 times worse than it was in 2016, as you know. But we're going to stop it, and we're going to deport all of these criminals that have been brought into the country.
Trump did respond to Harris on social media, saying in part, "Comrade Kamala Harris sees that she is losing, and losing badly. So now she is increasingly raising her rhetoric, going so far as to call me Adolf Hitler and anything else that comes to her warped mind." Trump heads to rallies in Arizona and Nevada today. Harris and former President Barack Obama will be in Georgia, where Bruce Springsteen will perform as part of their Get Out the Vote events.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Karen Pauls in Washington. More than 80% of Canadian adults say they now have access to regular health providers, but there are still over 5 million people who say they do not. Those figures come from the latest snapshot of the country's public health care system. The independent Canadian Institute for Health Information analyzes data from across the country. As Jennifer Yoon reports, this rare look showcases where the healthcare system is improving and where it's falling short.
I would give us an A-.
Toronto ER doctor Raghu Venugopal says the main result is encouraging from a new report card on the public healthcare system. The Canadian Institute for Health Information, known as CIHI, compiled data from provinces and territories, except Quebec, on key health system metrics.
The one thing that surprised me was the number of people who said that they had access to a regular healthcare provider.
83% of Canadian adults, says Kathleen Morris, the VP of Research and Analytics at CIHI. But that also means 5.4 million people still have trouble accessing primary care.
One of the big objectives of this project is for provinces to learn from each other about what's working and where they could improve.
The 3 territories and some of the Atlantic provinces are the jurisdictions struggling the most with primary care. Dr. Venugopal says more needs to be done to make sure it's accessible for everyone.
We must not be complacent that these numbers are an indicator that all is well. We also need to recognize that our system does make trudging steps of progress forward.
The report also found the number of surgeries have rebounded to pre-pandemic levels, and centers offering mental health services for young people have grown across Canada. But there's still much to do, including in improving access to electronic health records. Only 39% of Canadians got their information online. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, we're going to be above normal today in Winnipeg, temperature-wise. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We're live downtown on CBC 89.3 FM. Also 9:90 a.m. on the app or on YouTube this morning. Well, this half hour on the program, you've probably heard about the Great Resignation, or what about quiet quitting. Now some experts are saying this era is seeing the Great Exhaustion. What is that in the workplace, and why might you be concerned? We're going to explore that topic, so stay tuned this half hour for that conversation. Also, you've been calling our listener line, and we've got a funny story coming up to play for you. Because we started talking about mice this morning. I got an unwelcome surprise at my house when I lifted up my scarf and, oh, yeah. So what's it like in your Manitoba home this fall? 788-3205 if you want to share a mouse story. Hard to time these things because people are eating breakfast, so we're mindful of this. But we're going to have a call coming up, one of the stories you shared. So right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells with more serious news. She has her headlines this morning. Hi there.
Hi. Well, a Winnipeg mother had to wait weeks to find out if her son would get any help as he recovers from a brutal machete attack. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after being attacked in August, and she had to take time off work to go to appointments and to pay for special equipment to help him recover. But she says weeks went by without hearing a word from the victim's compensation office, victim services with the province. We're going to hear what happened there. And Winnipeg police say it is unfortunate, but they had no choice but to shoot and kill a dog that attacked and injured 4 people in Elmwood Tuesday. Officers say that dog had been running loose. A 16-year-old girl required a tourniquet because of the seriousness of her upper body injuries. We'll hear that story in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the forecast. As I mentioned, Abby, above normal today, hey?
Above normal for sure. We're looking at sunny conditions in the south with clouds developing later. Temperatures gradually warming up here in the southern part of the province to close to 13 degrees, while the north will be seeing some rain, a few flurries, transition to light snow and breezy conditions throughout the day. Right now, it sure feels a little chilly outside. 3 degrees in Winnipeg. We warm up above seasonal, as mentioned. We will see mostly sunny conditions, a mix of sun and clouds around the noon period. Light winds, temperature reaching around 12 degrees for Winnipeg. And then tonight we see some partly cloudy conditions that will clear as the night goes on. Up north, we're seeing a rain changing to light snow. Thompson at -5, Churchill at -3, Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach. Brandon at -4 at this time. Steinbach at Morris hovering near -2, Dauphin at 0, Gimli at 1. Sunny conditions ahead for most of the regions down south.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And now to the commute with Corey Funk.
Yeah, one change at Portage in Maine this morning, as I've kind of been alluding to, there's been lots of kind of things in flux there. And sure enough, got a call from Chris. And just starting this morning, southbound Maine, turning onto westbound Portage, you lose your curb turning lane. So you still can turn onto Portage from southbound Maine, but you just have one lane to do it from. So as you can imagine, everyone's kind of crowding into there, and that could cause some big backups for folks. So that's new at Portage in Maine as things kind of start to ramp up towards opening in July. So if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Okay, I'm in a careful what you wish for situation because honestly, while Abby was just doing the weather, listeners are now sending us videos of like chasing mice around their house. Yeah, so those are coming into Facebook. Thanks, Keith Anderson. We also, though, we asked because we were prompted by our own stories. I mentioned in my house I had a fright this morning. And Corey, your cat's collected how many mice?
Yeah, his kill count now is at 7. It's pretty wild.
We got a call?
Yep, sure did. Here it is.
Hi, this is Faria Sheikh. I put my Blundstones on for the first time since last spring and couldn't get my toe all the way in. So I thought there was maybe just a dog toy stuck in there. So when I turned it out, it turned out that it was a little mouse, all curled up, had passed peacefully, I hope, in its sleep as it was sleeping in the toe of my boot. I didn't wear them for a couple weeks after that.
My actual nightmare.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
My actual nightmare is like if a mouse would crawl up your pant leg or so, like, you know what I mean? That kind of deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was doing the show from home from our dining room table during COVID, I had a morning where I got up and I was setting up my equipment and, plugging in sort of the broadcast equipment. And as I plugged it in and got up, there one went scurrying along the baseboard.
She talked about it so nonchalantly. Like,
I
so yeah,
know.
I was in my boot. I just didn't wear it. Me, it'd be like I curled up into the fetal position and passed out. That's what happened to me. That's what would happen.
788-3205. 8:15 on your Thursday morning. Let's turn our attention to some workplace matters, shall we? In workplaces across the country, individuals are expressing feelings of fatigue, also weariness and stress at work. Now, it's a phenomenon that echoes earlier trends. Remember the Great Resignation, quiet quitting? But whatever you call this, now there's new challenges playing out in the workforce and beyond. So experts are now turning their attention to a phrase called the Great Exhaustion. Tori McNally is in studio to talk a bit about this and how it impacts our lives. Tori's the Vice President of Human Resources Consulting at Legacy Bose in Winnipeg. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
I think a lot of people will relate to this. And there will be some people saying, how is it different from past generations that would deal with stress and, being tired, overworked in the workplace? How do you describe the Great Exhaustion?
I think that, it probably isn't all that different from previous times. People have experienced stress throughout the ages, no question. But I think that when it comes on the heels of a trend like quiet quitting, it has a deeper impact. I think that quiet quitting really was people dragging themselves out of bed every morning and walking into work intending to do as little as possible. And I think that once you do that for several months, that your feelings of hopelessness and your desire and love for work really starts to dissipate. What you really need to do is when you're going to spend 8 hours somewhere is to think about things that you can learn and relationships that you can build. And if you're not in that mindset, if you're really dragging yourself down, it pulls you underwater pretty quickly.
What are we noticing about the Great Exhaustion in terms of generationally who's being impacted the most?
So I think that younger people were taught from a very young age to take care of their mental health. And that's a fantastic thing. That's exactly what they should have been taught. And so they're not sweeping it under the rug in the ways that maybe the older generation did. I think a lot of, past generations might have just, muscled under and continue going to work because they felt an obligation to. And younger people just say, I'm taking a mental health day. And they're not guilty about it. I also think that, attitudes have changed, and workplaces are working hard to bring mental health forward and make it be part of the conversation. And so if you're encouraging people to take care of their mental health, it's not going to be a surprise that people actually are going to take care of their mental health.
How does it impact absenteeism?
So absenteeism is going up. I know that, decades ago, it was a luxury that your employer would offer paid sick days. That was something that you would see as a perk when you were looking for a job and be surprised to find one that had it. And now, anybody who's federally regulated must give, those employers must give 10 paid sick days. But it also has become the norm in most workplaces across Canada. And the other thing that workplaces are starting to bring in now that does feel like a little bit of a perk is personal days. And so rather than saying, you have to have a fever and a doctor's note to take a sick day, you can just say, I'm taking a personal day. And actually the nice thing about that from the employer's perspective is that they can be planned. So rather than waiting till, 8:30 to phone in and say you're going to be sick that day, you can say, I'm going to be taking Friday off as a mental health day. And then the employer can actually plan for that and make sure that the business can continue.
If we have this larger young generation, as you said, that is changing the workplaces because, as you alluded to, the tolerance for sort of just maybe sucking it up or making yourself sick with work and just hiding your stress and putting in all these hours is sort of shifted to say, no, hang on a minute. If we care about mental health, let's care about mental health. But if you have that pressing on the workplace, then you have absenteeism going up. And there's no judgment in this question. But then you also have the same amount of work to be done. And those folks left that maybe are sucking it up. Maybe I'm not saying they should be, but they're, where do we go from here in terms of what employers can learn from this about the number of goals they're trying to meet and the amount of work that is to be done? Because I don't think that all those things can exist at once. It's just logic, right?
Right. And I mean, this is part of that whole trend of, wages not increasing at the pace that they should be with respect to inflation and with respect to how they did in the past. And we've gone through rounds of layoffs where, maybe the same amount of work has to get done by less people, right? Like you're looking left and looking right and there's empty desks beside you. So like all of those things are realities that have been happening over the past 5 years. And they are hard. And so, but I mean, businesses still need to be in the business of making money so that they continue to employ employees, right? And so I think that if you can do some things where you're planning those mental health breaks, encouraging your employees to take their breaks at work, because like it is clinically proven that those 15-minute breaks are useful and beneficial to employees. I mean, it's all about finding those moments of calm so you can like just stop with your endocrine system from being on supercharge all the time. And so as employers, it might be as simple as saying, encouraging people to go for their lunch break, get people to go, I know it's getting colder now, but get people to go outside and take some fresh air in, walk around the block as a team, things like that. So it's like you're not losing the productivity of the entire day and you're not having somebody, suddenly go off on a 3-month stress leave, because that's becoming quite common as part of this great exhaustion, right? So what can you do to create moments of calm in the day so that employees can get a break?
If you're listening and you're someone that might think there could be something bigger going on with you, are there signs sort of if you're working between what might be a level of stress that you could regulate within a workplace environment? Because stress is part of our lives. It's not always unhealthy. And maybe when, hang on a minute, I actually am in a burnout situation, maybe I should take advantage. Because you may have an employer that offers mental health days and you might never have taken one.
Right. And we also run into the situation where people worry that it's going to get worse. And so they don't want to take it now because they worry about sick kids or something that's going to come up where they'll have burned through their days. They're saving their days. And so like those are real concerns. But there are warning signs. I mean, if you're noticing somebody who is, noticeably grumpy, those changes in behavior. I also think that when you're noticing that people are starting to work longer into the evening, because that's the other thing is that our phones are always with us. And so people will be emailing at 9:00 at night. And I think it's really important for employers to say, it's fine if you're doing it as flex. Like if you went to your child's recital in the afternoon and you want to work at 9:00, like let's use it to your advantage, but don't feel like you need to burn the midnight oil and work 12-hour days and respond to emails. And so hopefully that will change.
On the other side of this, I guess, if an employer is getting really vague reasons for people being off and absent maybe more often than they used to be and more repeatedly, how does an employer handle that when there is a legitimate reason to have something disciplinary happen? In this day and age, I think those conversations are very stressful for employers who might be well-intentioned and well-meaning with their staff, but they don't know how to deal with absenteeism in 2024.
Right. So, the best thing to do is to have a policy so that it's very clear to employees and employer how many days they're allowed. And if they're allowed 10 days and they're taking days within those 10 days, there should be no guilt and nothing wrong with doing that. Employers really can't ask questions. Like if you get a doctor's note saying that you're off for 3 months, the employer actually can't say why, what's wrong with you, I need a diagnosis. They can't do any of those things. They just have to accept it at face value and then work on, the limitations that they might have coming back and talk to them about how they can accommodate and reorganize the workplace for them on their return. But it's a human rights issue because it's personal health, right? And so you really can't hold employees' feet to the fire to get them to explain those things.
I know you were mentioning mental health days can work, and there certainly are some studies that suggest that, but there's also some research that says mental wellness days aren't working in certain places. Do we know what makes it work in a workplace? Is it the proper number of days, or is it making sure employees take them? Like, what's the difference between a successful program and one that doesn't work for offices?
I think it's cultural. I think that there's I think that there are, sometimes it'll come down from on high, but your actual supervisor will make you feel guilty. And so, sometimes there will be policy, but when you ask your supervisor for the day off, you get a disgruntled or negative response, and people hold on to that, right? Like if they're trying to do something that they have a right to do and they're not allowed to, it does make people feel deeply uncomfortable because there's a conflict there, right, of values. And so I think that is part of it, is that, it's one thing for, your upper echelon of leadership to agree that personal days are useful, or for, human resources department to push it through. But you have to really go right down to every single supervisor who's approving those absences so that they understand that that mental health is a priority for the organization and that their employees are respected and protected.
Kind of walk the walk. All right. Thank you very much, Tori. Appreciate this.
Of course.
I think this will be relatable to a lot of folks listening this morning. So if you're one of them, you can reach out to CBC and let us know how you handle this in your workplace, whether you're a business owner, a manager, or of course an employee. What's it been like for you? Tori McNally's been with us live in our CBC studios, Vice President of Human Resources Consulting at Legacy Bose here in Winnipeg.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Local music now from Kelly Bado, local artist, and Belzom on CBC.
Ma vie dormait dans l'ennui, la solitude et la nuit, et j'ai vu ta lumière. Nous n'étions pas amis, toi ailleurs et moi ici, mais tu fais la différence, j'avance. J'étais sûre que dans ce monde, personne ne se souciait de personne, mais tu n'es pas comme ces gens qui t'ignorent et qui t'abandonnent. Partout la vie nous assomme, mais dans ce monde de fous, l'amour est toujours en nous. On dévoile sa bienveillance, quand on ressent la souffrance, ça devient l'évidence, une chance. Les héros ne se ressemblent pas, ils sont souvent invisibles. Tu fais partie de cela, tu rends possible l'impossible. Tu me donnes de ta flamme, elle fait de moi une belle âme. Tu me donnes de ta flamme, les belles âmes font de belles âmes. Comme un ange, tu me protèges de tous les mauvais sorts et des sortilèges, de mes blessures, de mes déchirures. Toi qui es l'inconnu, c'est comme si on s'était déjà connu. Je ne sais pas d'où vient ta lumière, elle ne m'est plus étrangère. Ma vie reprend vie, les belles âmes font de belles âmes.
Isn't that beautiful? And do you recognize it? So Kelly Bado in Winnipeg, this is her cover of Indian Cities, Good People. You might recognize it. Keep listening. We're going to take this right into the news. So this is the award-winning band Indian City releasing their uplifting single last year, and Kelly Bato said, we're missing some French, so they blended it all together. Love this.
Les belles âmes font de belles âmes.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It's sunny. It's a little chilly. It is 3 degrees right now. Our temperature's lost one in the past hour. Will be a mix of sun and clouds today, and we do warm back up above seasonal with a high of 12. A Winnipeg mother had to wait weeks to find out if her son would get any help as he recovers from a brutal machete attack. Megan Smart's 15-year-old son needed 3 teams of surgeons after that August attack. She's had to take time off from work for appointments and pay for special equipment to aid in his recovery. But she says she went weeks without hearing a word from the program that offers compensation for victims of crime.
It just feels disrespectful, and you're already going through the worst time of your life, you know, trying to even keep your own mind straight and on top of everything, and just to find that there's no real support is really disappointing.
It wasn't until CBC contacted Victim Services Department that Smart says she received a reply. She says they apologized for the delay and told her they will cover most of her expenses. Winnipeg police shot and killed a dog after it attacked 4 people in Elmwood on Tuesday. Officers were called to Stadacona and Talbot. Constable Claude Chancy says people nearby had managed to corral the animal to prevent more people from being attacked.
We had 4 individuals that suffered serious injuries as a result of dog bites, one of them being a 16-year-old youth, and officers had to require the use of a tourniquet, the application of a tourniquet, in order to help medical attention to this person.
Chancy says the dog continued to be aggressive and officers had to shoot it for public safety. The 16-year-old girl was taken to hospital and treated for serious upper body injuries. The owners of the dog and animal services have been notified. A former broker for Winnipeg Shindico Realty has testified in court he has seen documents indicating the company president paid an $85,000 bribe to the former head of Winnipeg's public service, Phil Schiegel. The former broker, John Pearson, is suing Shindico's president and vice president for $5 million over the breakdown of their business partnership. In a statement of claim, Pearson says he ended the brokerage association with Shindico over allegations of corruption. In a statement of defense, Shindico officials deny the claim, a Shindico lawyer declining to comment on Pearson's testimony about the bribe. CBC News has reached out to Schiegel for comment. A new national report shows radon levels across Canada are worse now than a decade ago. Radon is a naturally occurring gas that can cause lung cancer. The last report found 7% of households exceeded the Canadian guideline level of 200 becquerels, a unit measuring radioactivity. Aaron Gudarzy says he has this to say. He is the scientific lead on this study.
The new report finds that it's not 7% anymore. It's 17.8%, a dramatic 2.5 times increase in the risk of a household exceeding that level.
Winnipeg is one of the cities listed as having as many as a quarter of its buildings being above the guidelines. Gudarzy says newer houses and homes with basements retrofitted and more airtight are likely to have higher levels of radon. A former CAO accused of pocketing more than $500,000 during a faked cyber attack on a Manitoba municipality has had her wages garnished. Former Gilbert Plains CAO Amber Fisher has been ordered to pay the money back after failing to respond to a lawsuit by the municipality. The case prompted changes right across the province when it comes to civil servants. The Manitoba Municipal Administrators created a formal complaint process and a new code of conduct. Nicole Chakota is president of the organization.
They cannot completely prevent these issues from occurring, but they will make sure that our members are more accountable to standards and ethical conduct. And we're hoping that by doing that, we will be able to ensure that there is confidence in local government.
Chakota says a profession accreditation program is also in the works. You can find more news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, we're not done with making people squirmy. You ready?
Okay.
One last mouse call. This one just came in.
Oh, hi. My name's Kimberly Sutherland. When I was young, many years ago, on the farm, we used to do controlled burns at the end of in the fall on crops. And my sister and I were supposed to help kind of stand along the fire line to make sure it didn't cross. And all we had to do was wave at my mom or dad if it did get approaching that line. And my sister, who was all cool and was like a teenager, I was younger, she insisted on wearing her bell-bottom pants and flats, or I think they were slingbacks they were called back then. And I said to her, I'm wearing rubber boots and tucking my pant legs in. And she's like, oh, no, we don't need to do that. And sure enough, a mouse ran off the field when the fire was burning and ran straight up her pant leg. And I have never seen a girl scream like my sister did.
Oh, don't you wish? I wish skinny jeans were in again. I find myself looking at my pant legs today a little differently. I don't know what you have.
Absolutely, yes.
Thanks for all the calls, everybody. It is that time of year for sure. Big thanks to our news department, Heather Wells, and also out there, Megan Catchison and Aaron Broman today. Our live team, Abby Adeyemi, Kevin Ipatebo, and Corey Funk, who has a last quick word on traffic.
Yeah, southbound Main Street, right at Portage, you lose your curb turning lane onto westbound Portage there because of construction happening. So you can still turn onto Portage, but it's all just in one lane there. So it might be a bit backed up southbound Main at Portage today.
Okay, big thanks to our APs in unit, our associate producers who work so hard on all of our programs, as well as our leaders in unit, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. I want to tell you now about the call-in. You can leave a message, 788-3797 for the noon call-in with your favorite word. What's your favorite word? Or what's your least favorite word, least liked? Today, the author Ann Curzon of the book Says Who, A Kinder Funny Usage Guide for Everyone Who Cares About Words, is Lori Hoogstraten's guest. So Lori's guest hosting the noon call-in conversation. That should be fun. Between 12:30 and 1, join that conversation or leave a message about your favorite word right now or least liked one. 788-3797. The Current's coming up next.